Rejected by the ruthless Alpha King, moonlight spilled across the marble like milk, turning the aisle into a pale river that led straight to the throne and the man who could end her life with a word. Mira felt the weight of every stair hooking into the back of her dress as she moved, the silk catching on the faintest rise in the floor, the pearls at her collar cool against skin that had never felt colder. The ceremonial hall was packed wall to wall, the banners of old houses hanging in still air, the breath of so many wolves held as if the night itself were pausing to listen. Whispers slid beneath the orchestra's low drone. Omega. Charity. Pretty little lamb. She kept her chin even. She knew better than to pretend her legs weren't shaking. She let the tremor ride, her stride steady, the tremble swallowed by the sway of the gown. Beyond the river of light waited Luka on the dais, a figure in black and silver, shoulders squared beneath a mantle edged in moonthread. Golden amber eyes watched her without a flicker. A crown that looked like winter rested in his hair. The Alpha King, her mate, her executioner, her chance. The altar burned with long, narrow candles, wax tracing white tears down iron stems. The pack council stood to the left, robed and severe, rings flashing when they folded hands. Elder Marcellus was among them, spare as a pine in winter, a face lined by too much knowing. To the right, the nobles and their wives occupied tiers like steps in a stone garden. Lady Seraphine leaned slightly forward in the second row, lips red, eyes bright, with something that looked like hunger. Mira tried not to look at her but felt the glance anyway, the way a thorn finds skin. A boy with a silver sash carried the bonding cord. The music thinned, then hushed. Somewhere far above, a raven tapped against a high window and was gone. Mira passed the last row and felt the hall open like a lung around her. She could hear cloth brush and rings catch, and the smallest shift of leather as wolves adjusted their stance to see better. She fixed on Luka. It was the only way forward. He stood as if cut from one piece, not a single edge softened by warmth. Power radiated from the center of him, quiet and absolute, the way cold radiates from deep snow. It hurt to look at him for long, but she didn't stop. The bond tugged like a tide that had waited all her life to pull. Her heart beat so loud she thought it might echo. She didn't want him to see that. She didn't want him to see anything she hadn't chosen to give. She smoothed the front of her dress once, felt the soft fabric under her palm like a promise she didn't trust, and stood before him. The officiant's voice came from somewhere between the candles. Before the moon and the law, before the blood of this realm, we stand witness to the sealing of a bond. Luka Duskbane, Alpha King, Mira of the low ranks, 2 threads to weave 1 cord. Mira tasted iron. The words stung even though she had practiced wearing them like jewelry. Of the low ranks, a kindness compared to what most would say. Her breath fogged the air. She told her hands not to shake. They obeyed until they didn't. Luka's gaze did not shift. The gold of his eyes looked brighter, near flame. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something flicker behind the iron of his expression, a wave breaking then smoothing. She wanted more than anything to catch it and hold it and make it stay. Inside him something prowled. He didn't let it out. He had learned very young to put locks on his own bones. Ragnar pressed once against the gates of his ribs like a storm wind rattling shutters, then went still, coiled. Mine. The word rolled like thunder in the space between Luka's breath and his heart. He tightened his hands behind his back until the knuckles went pale. The curse ran cold along his spine and left a trail of heat. He would not bend. He would not be led by a hunger that made kings fools. Mira heard nothing of that, only the low murmur as Elder Marcellus stepped forward with the cord. The bond is a tether woven of choice and fate, he said softly, eyes flicking over Luka, then Mira as if he were measuring both against a scale only he could see. You will speak. The cord will answer. The moon will witness. She was meant to speak first. She swallowed and the sound seemed loud to her, though the hall was so quiet the candles might have had ears. She wished for her mother for one painful second, for the scent of cinnamon tea and the rough knit of a blanket. Those belonged to another life, another girl. "Luka," she said. Her voice held. It was not strong. It did not need to be strong. It needed to exist, and it did. "I come to you by law and by fate. I don't bring a house or a dowry or lines that run in gold ink. I bring what I am." A murmur, soft as fallen leaves. At the dais' edge, Lady Seraphine smiled with half her mouth. Mira kept her eyes on Luka. "I offer my loyalty, my hands, my breath in winter and my shade in summer. I offer to stand when you stand and kneel when you kneel. I offer to be the place your wolf rests." A sound moved through the crowd like a single inhalation. She felt heat rise in her face and didn't fight it. She meant every word, even if no one would believe that a girl with nothing to trade could make an oath that weighed enough to balance a king. She hoped he would feel that. She hoped, like a fool, for something soft to answer. Ragnar lifted his head and the world inside Luka tilted toward the girl like a compass pulled by a secret lodestone. "Take." Luka stared at her mouth without meaning to. The curse spread thinly across his chest like frost, and he resisted the urge to rub the ache away, slow enough the movement couldn't be seen as weakness. It had escalated over the last weeks, a quiet tightening at dawn, a stutter in his pulse at night. He had dismissed it until he couldn't. Marcellus had not dismissed it. Marcellus had looked at him as if the bones of the world were counting down. "Luka Duskbane," the officiant said. "Alpha of alphas, speak." The hall held its breath again. The candles sizzled. Somewhere at the back, a wolf coughed and was still. Luka's mouth opened. What wanted to come out was not what left. What wanted to come out was a low, simple thing. Mine. He shut the door on it. "By law," Luka said. His voice was iron striking stone. "By blood. By duty to this realm, and to the peace I inherited and will die to keep." He paused, and the pause was a crack he could feel, as if a river were trying to cut through a dam. He clenched his jaw until it passed. "I will not bind this cord." The silence broke with a soft shatter. It wasn't a shout. Not at first. It was 1,000 whispers colliding, the hiss of disbelief, the rush of felt relief, the bite of secret smiles. It was wind through dry grass. Mira felt it on her skin before she understood what he had said, and when the understanding arrived, it was like falling a long way without hitting anything. The officiant blinked once as if the candle smoke had briefly stung his eye. Elder Marcellus's mouth flattened. Lady Seraphine's knuckles whitened around her fan, and then loosened in a gentle little sigh of pleasure. Mira's lips moved before sound returned to them. "What?" Luka didn't blink. He looked at her the way a cliff looks at the sea. "I reject you." The words reached every ear. They rolled and hit and lodged like stones. The pack council shifted, but no one moved forward to stop him. It wasn't illegal to refuse a bond before the cord was sealed. It was simply something kings did not do. In the front row, a counselor with white eyebrows lowered his gaze in a slow, deliberate way that looked like surrender. Wolves near the back swayed as if lowering out of an invisible wind. Mira's vision narrowed until the world was Luka's coat, black like a night with no moon, the edge of silver embroidery, like frost on glass. Behind the coat, the man who could have reached out his hand, who could have lifted the cord and made a home of what her life had been, did not move. Her body understood before her mind that it should steady itself. Her knees softened and she locked them, and the dizziness surged up in answer. Voices from the crowd pricked at her like thorns. Of course. Mercy not to bind a weak mate. He spares the realm an Omega queen. Imagine if Seraphine had been chosen. Lady Seraphine laughed once very softly. A pity. The dress is almost regal from far away. Elder Marcellus stepped forward half a pace. "My king," he said, and there was no tilt in his voice, only an old steadiness. "Consider the optics." "I have considered," Luka said. "End it." Ragnar tore at his cage. "You lie to yourself." Mira's throat had gone tight. She opened it. "You don't know me." Luka's eyes cut to hers, sharp as a thrown blade. For the span of a heartbeat, she thought there was pain behind them, the kind one hides by breaking other things. Then the gold went flat again. "That is the point." Something in her chest made a small sound. Not quite a crack, not quite a tear. It reduced a whole future she had dared to picture for a single reckless hour into ash she could sew into a pocket and carry like a private curse. The officiant looked past Luka to the council. Elder Marcellus offered nothing with his face. His hands, folded in front of him, had tightened enough that the veins stood up. A counselor shifted the angle of the ceremonial book so that the page of acceptance no longer showed. The page for record of refusal gleamed like a bare throat. Mira's breath grew shallow. She felt cold in a way that did not belong to air, and hot in a way that did not belong to blood. The hall seemed to lean, and she had the sudden, absurd thought that if she reached out she could catch herself against the polished shoulder of the world and hold it where it was. "Stand," something inside her whispered, not in words so much as in a shape that wanted to become a word. She tried to find it again, and it slid away, like a fish in a river at night. A boy brought a silver dish. The officiant set the cord upon it with a small practiced bow. He did not look at Mira. He did not look at Luka. The ritual had rules for almost everything. It had very few for this. "Let it be recorded," the officiant said quietly, "that on this night, called by the moon and witnessed by the blood, the bond was offered and refused." The murmurs rose into true sound. A noblewoman gasped with theatrical restraint. Two young wolves in the back elbowed each other, eyes bright with the thrill of gossip that would live for years. Mira became aware of her hands again. They were empty. Of course they were empty. Her palms itched, as if looking for something to hold. The light seemed too bright. The air was too thin. The pearls at her throat were suddenly too tight, as if the string had shrunk. Luka's gaze did not waver. The curse drew a fine tremor along his fingers, and he hid them in the folds of his coat. A tiny tremor sounded somewhere low in his body like the start of a growl, and he breathed in through his nose until it subsided. Ragnar roared against bone, frustrated and hungry. "You choose death dressed as honor." A counselor spoke from the line. "For the peace, Majesty," perhaps a statement to the floor, to quiet the hall. Luka's jaw shifted and the candlelight caught the blade of his cheek. "There is no disruption to peace. Rumors travel like smoke. Let them choke on it." Elder Marcellus's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. "My king." The plea was almost gentle. It was also a tether thrown over the gorge that had opened. Luka did not take it. He looked down at the girl one last time, not to savor, not to gloat, to confirm, to brand a moment into the iron, where he kept things he could not undo. Mira found her voice where she had dropped it near her tongue. "You are making a mistake." Silence skinned the hall bare. The sentence was simple, but something in it landed with a weight that did not belong to her rank. Without meaning to, people listened. For a moment that had no proper length, Luka's control wavered. The gold of his eyes darkened like honey stirred with smoke. He imagined what it would feel like to lift the cord anyway. He saw himself closing his hand over her wrist, the pulse there quick, the tendons fine as wires. He imagined breath moving through his body without the shard-cold catch that had been there lately, and the hunger that lay down, and the knowing that the world had become narrow and right and protected. He imagined it so well that Ragnar pressed the image like a paw on his chest. "Do it." He shut the door on all of it. "Guards," Luka said. "See she is escorted from the hall with courtesy." The word courtesy broke like ice. It didn't melt. It shattered and fell, and the cracks ran in all directions. The guards stepped forward with the careful faces of men who knew that even mercy had sharp edges here. Mira felt the floor sway for real. She blinked and the room doubled, then steadied, then doubled again. The world had always been a narrow bridge. She had thought the bond would widen it. She had been wrong. She looked at Luka one last time and could not make her mouth form anything that would not make the wound worse. Lady Seraphine rose like a pale flame and swept a hand along the air where the cord had been, as if to clear away an unpleasant smell. Tragic, she murmured to someone who didn't need to hear it. But inevitable. Words found Mira then, not for Luka, not for the hall, but for herself. She tucked them under her ribs where they could do the most good. You are not broken because he did not choose you. You are still you. A humming note started behind her eyes. She tried to ease the pearl's pressure, but her fingers felt like gloves buckled too tight. The light wavered. The world tilted. The bridge narrowed to a line. She tasted salt and something sweet and wrong. The boy with the silver dish had moved. The candles had bent. The moon beyond the windows could not get in. A sound brushed the inside of her mind, softer than breath on glass. Mira. She froze without moving. The sound was not a memory. It reached in and set a small thing upright that had been knocked down long ago. She stared at the floor as if the voice had come from there. The hall receded until it felt like a picture on the far wall. The voice waited with a patience that was not human. Mira. She turned toward it with something inside her that had teeth. I am here. The name formed like a handprint. Nyx. The answer came like a pulse. Little Queen. Her knees went somewhere she couldn't reach. The floor rose and loosened, and met her not as stone meets, hard and unforgiving, but as water meets, accepting and unstoppable. She tried to grab the nearest shape, but her body didn't know where her hands ended and the air began. The last thing she saw, framed by candlelight, and the hush that follows shock, was Luka's face as the tremor in his hands betrayed him for a heartbeat, and something that wasn't triumph or satisfaction or even anger broke across his eyes like a crack letting in weather. Ragnar slammed the bars with all his force. Go to her. Luka did not move. He held the hall with his posture, spine straight, gaze level, a king unmoved by a storm of his own making. Inside, the storm found walls he didn't know he had and tested them, screaming. Mira's body folded in a clean, graceful collapse as if she had decided to sleep in the only place she was allowed. The guards were almost fast enough. Elder Marcellus lifted a hand and stopped them with a look reserved for harder nights. The officiant closed the book. The music did not start again. The moon stayed outside the glass, and the river of light along the aisle lost a little of its shine. Night air hit like cold water. The doors boomed behind her, and the murmur of the hall fell away. Mira ran down the marble steps, silk tearing along the edge of a stair, pearls knocking softly at her throat as if they wanted to turn back. Gravel hissed under her shoes, formal hedges gave way to dark trees, and the clipped scent of the palace faded beneath damp earth and pine. She cut through a row of white roses that would have been a blessing on any other night. A guard's voice rose and broke off, only for show. The garden's paths were clean lines in moonlight, but she left them, letting branches take back their rights against her torn skirts. Each breath scraped, not from running, from the words that would not stop replaying. I reject you. The wood closed around her with a cool that steadied more than comfort could. An owl turned its head as she passed. Stones slid underfoot down a shallow slope to the river, a dark braid carving the land. She knelt on a flat rock and cupped water to her mouth. It tasted like iron. She splashed her face until the shock cleared some of the blur and left her with what could not be washed off. Memory returned in flashes instead of a clean line. A low-beamed room. A bowl of salt. Green leaves crushed to paste beneath a pestle. A woman humming without a tune. A man who called himself uncle standing outside to watch the road. They had told her she was ill and the marks would help her sleep. They had painted cool lines at her pulse and throat, wrapped a thin thread around her forearm that felt colder than thread should, and whispered against her hair. "Hide your scent, little one. Hide your light." She pressed her fingers to the place the thread had once circled, though the skin had long since forgotten to show it. The river kept its steady talk, not caring what palaces declared. She bent over her reflection, but the water didn't hold a face. It held a smear of white and dark in the bright wash of the moon. A voice moved softly inside as if someone had drawn a fingertip across glass. "Mira." She went still without deciding to. The night didn't change. The river did not miss a beat. The air kept its cool, but the shape of the world shifted because the sound had a place to belong. "I'm here." She didn't know if she spoke aloud or in bone. The answer came like a curtain sliding open. "Little queen." A short, unsteady sound slipped out, not quite a laugh. "This can't be real." Not a dream. Not anymore. The words weren't like human words. They fit into the empty places she had carried for years. They were a mirror, catching light she hadn't been allowed to own. "Why now?" "Because you stopped pretending you were not hurt, because you fell." "I ran." Sometimes running is how a hunt begins, or, "I am not a hunter." You don't have to be. Stop agreeing to be prey. She drew a breath that didn't scrape as hard. The skin beneath her eyes cooled. She looked at her wet hands and felt the heat they held as if for the first time. "Nyx," she whispered, and the name slid into place like a key. "Is it you?" The part that was wrapped and kept quiet, the part they feared. Who were they hiding me from? Wolves who smell power and call it threat. Men who sell what isn't theirs. Alphas who would rather own a thing than kneel to it. Luka. Silence opened in her like winter air. The name tasted of frost and want. The river slid around a rock with a sound like cloth pulled through a tight space. Names are tools. Use them. Don't be used by them. "I don't know how to do any of this, sir. You know how to breathe, how to keep moving, how not to let embarrassment become your shape." A branch snapped on the slope above. Her head lifted before thought caught it. She inhaled again. Deeper. The way a wolf reads a night. A faint thread unspooled between trees. Cold metal. Winter earth. A clean salt she knew even when she didn't want to. Not the man, but the trace of him. Luka. She stood too fast and steadied herself with a low branch. The world tilted, then held. On the ridge, a shadow stood where a cedar grew from stone. The posture could belong to only one person. The crown and mantle were gone. The spine still carried rooms full of eyes. Ragnar paced against his cage. "There." Luka kept still. He held himself the way practice had taught him to hold. The burn inside his chest had sharpened since he'd left the hall, a thin, hot blade pressing up under his ribs. He'd thought fresh air would cool it. The air had its own ideas. The girl had reached the river and knelt like a pilgrim with no shrine. When she stood, the night rearranged itself around her. He didn't want words for it. Words would make it real. She turned her face to the current, and for an instant he saw the lines her face would carry if no one broke her. Not tragedy, not surrender, but a refusal to forget. Something in him leaned toward her like iron toward a hidden magnet. He righted it. "Bring her back," Ragnar urged, a growl soft as breath. "Now." "No. She is ours. She is a mistake." Ragnar's displeasure vibrated through his bones. "You dressed fear as law." Leaves shifted behind him. Elder Marcellus came to stand half a step back and to the side, a shadow among shadows, steady as the cedar. "Majesty." "What?" "The old lines are loud tonight." Marcellus's voice was low, controlled. "They haven't sounded like this in years. The curse has teeth again. Every decision you make away from your mate feeds it. You're confusing ceremony with fate." "I'm not young enough to confuse anything here." Marcellus's glance slid down to the river without lingering, and came back. "Bring her back." She is not fit to wear a mark. And yet your wolf refuses every other name I hand him. He refused Seraphine, without showing his teeth. Then with them. He refused the Duke's daughter, the general's niece, the merchant's chosen. He refuses because something in you that isn't afraid of work knows what it takes to keep a kingdom upright. It takes breath. It takes not dying. Binding myself to a weakness is worse than dying. You're old enough to know the difference between a weakness and a restraint your enemies taught you to admire. Varos is counting on you to keep confusing the two. The name sat between them with its own gravity. Varos had been quiet. Quiet was a tactic, not a peace. I won't be led by a bond I didn't choose. Marcellus did not sigh. Do you want a statement prepared for the council by morning? Write something they can swallow without choking and still hate. They'll read between the lines anyway. Good. Marcellus inclined his head. You can call this distance wisdom, he said softer, or you can walk down and test whether the moon will keep letting you live. He withdrew into the trees, light-footed for a man with a winter in his beard. Mira sank to the bank. Cold seeped through the fabric clinging to her legs until it steadied into a clear feeling instead of ache. She looked toward the ridge. Nothing but cutouts of branches against a bruised sky. She felt watched. She refused to let it change what the night could do. Will you teach me? She asked, and the question belonged to a part of her that had been trained to make requests sound small. You know more than you think. First lesson, don't apologize to your own bones. I can do that. Her laugh was quiet and true. She pressed both hands to the ground and rose. The torn hem drank river and clung to her shins. The stars learned how to hold still. On the ridge, Luka took one step he wouldn't remember and stopped as if a wire had pulled tight. The burn climbed to his throat. He gripped cedar bark until splinters bit skin. Go, Ragnar urged. Now. What are you afraid of? Ragnar pressed when Luka stayed. That I'll feel better. Silence answered. Relief can be a dangerous teacher. Luka leaned his forehead against the tree because no one could see, and wood didn't judge. He watched until she turned from the river and walked into the trees. Her back straight, her steps sure, as if the ground had agreed to share its balance. He moved through the forest without sound and returned to the palace by a servant's corridor. The formal light of the halls had gone soft. Most candles guttered low. He passed a gallery where, earlier, Lady Seraphine's laughter had rung like a silver spoon against glass. Now her perfume clung faintly to the air, roses with a hard edge. A pair of junior counselors whispered near a niche, hands full of rumor and calculation. He did not slow. In his chambers he didn't light the lamps. A coal bed glowed in the grate, mean and dutiful. He braced his hands on the map table and waited for his body to obey a command as simple as breathe. Breath came in short parcels and refused to stay paid. The blade under his ribs pressed up, patient as a craftsman. He pressed his thumb to the bead at his wrist, as if order could pass through skin into artery. The scent rose faint as a line of light under a closed door. River, pine, a clean salt that felt like the first day after winter. He reached for the decanter and missed the neck. His fingers curled around the edge of the map instead and the paper creaked. The sound belonged to old campaigns and younger promises. Leave me, he said to the room, though it had already learned to do that. Walls keep secrets if you feed them enough nights. Ragnar settled in the corner of his mind, eyes open, ears up. You can outlast anyone but yourself. I know. Then go to her. Not tonight. He sank into the chair because pride is wasted on empty furniture, and because the pain had learned a new path that ran behind his eyes. He stared at the door until it blurred, then at the window until it became sky without meaning, then at the memory of his father standing in this same room teaching a lesson that had saved his life and wrecked other parts of it. The scent did not fade. It tightened its thread up through the collar of his coat and laid itself beneath his tongue. Ragnar's breathing stayed slow and even, the way a guardian keeps watch when the pack sleeps with one ear open. You're not winning. I know. The blade turned with clean intent. His fingers loosened. The chair in the room and the maps became further away than they should be. He felt the floor more than he saw it. The rug gave under his shoulder and caught the last of his weight. And the last thing he took with him was the taste of the river and the sense of a girl standing alone on a rock, not asking for rescue, making a promise to her own bones. Mira left the water and worked back through the trees by slower paths, letting the forest teach her the edges of dark and the slippery places where leaves lay loose. At the boundary, where wild met ordered hedge, she paused to listen. Palace lights threw soft squares on the ground. Voices drifted from an open loggia, then moved away. She crossed the lawn with her chin lifted, the ruined dress making a quiet sound like pages turned. 2 servants stepped aside without meeting her eyes. One of the pack council went past with a roll of parchment tucked under his arm and pretended not to recognize her in the shadows. She took the narrow side stairs meant for staff and climbed into the quiet of the east wing where the guest rooms held ceremonial overflow. Her foster family's door opened on a room lit by one lamp. Her foster mother's mouth trembled before it settled into something like a smile that had learned not to hope. Her foster father's hands twisted at his belt, then stilled. "Come inside." Mira stepped over the threshold and tasted the stale sweetness of pastries saved for celebration and left untouched. She washed the river from her face in a shallow basin and didn't look at herself in the mirror. From the corridor came the faint click of a woman's heels and a whisper of silk that smelled like roses. The heels paused and moved on. Lady Seraphine's perfume faded with distance. Her foster mother unpinned the pearls with careful fingers and set them in a dish. "Rest." "I will. Thank you." When she lay down, the bed felt too soft. The ceiling's painted stars were too bright. She turned on her side and curled around the space where a wolf might have slept if a life had been kinder. Sleep did not come. Stillness did. In stillness, Nyx moved. "You asked for a lesson. Here's another. You can forgive and not return. You can be soft and still be stone. I need to be both. You are both. Will you stay? I have nowhere else to go." She let the breath settle. At some point the room tilted toward a dream. She stood on the river stone again and the current ran cold around her ankles. And when she looked up, Luka was there, not as a man but as the shadow of a great wolf whose eyes held a gold she had wanted to forget. The wolf stepped close without touching. The mark burned across the night between them, not on skin, but on something deeper. She woke with her palm pressed flat to her neck, breath quick, the name she refused to love drying against her tongue. Why him? No answer came from the room. One came from the part of her that had learned to stop apologizing. Because the bond is not a trick, and it does not ask your permission to exist. It asks what you will do with it. She lay awake, listening to her own breathing and to a palace that had become a stranger, until the dark thinned. Somewhere, far across courtyards and corridors, a king lay on a floor he would not admit to touching, and in his chest, a wolf refused to sleep. Dawn slipped into the east wing like a careful guest. Mira woke to rose soap, cold stone, and the faint iron of river water dried into the torn hem of her dress. For a moment, she didn't know the room. Then the ceiling's painted stars steadied and her foster father's whisper bled through the door. "She can't stay. She is our duty. That duty ends when the king rejects her in front of the realm." "Lower your voice." Mira lay still and listened until the words thinned into worry. She rose, washed, and watched the droplets roll as if the basin had learned to breathe. Beyond the window, a moth flexed its wings once. A latch clicked 3 floors down, and the sound traveled the stair like a coin sliding along a slot. "You're hearing what has always been there," Nyx murmured, not proud, simply true. "You were taught to ignore it. That lesson is over." "I can feel the ground," Mira whispered. "It's like it wants me to know where it is." "It does." She dressed in a plain gown left folded at the bed's foot. The ruined silk lay like shed skin across a chair. In the small mirror, her face was the same and not. The eyes were hers, the line of the mouth no longer trained to beg. Her pulse beat steady, as if a drum had been pulled from mud and struck clean for the first time. A knock. Her foster mother entered with tea and bread, hands careful to hide their tremor. Eat. Thank you. Word is spreading. What word? That the king made a wise choice. Because I am weak. Because you are cursed. The word slid and fell. Who said that? Someone who wants it to be true. Lady Seraphine. The older woman's mouth tightened. Keep your door closed, avoid the halls. I can't avoid a house. You can avoid the way it looks at you. I am not cursed. Her foster mother's eyes flicked to the sleeve hiding Mira's forearm. Then may the moon prove you right. I don't need the moon for that. Softness touched the older eyes for a breath, then hardened back into practicality. When you leave, use the south stair. Leave. They will pay the courtesy of asking you to go. Where? Home. Home had always been a room that shrank when people walked into it carrying fear. Mira set the cup down and opened the door to a corridor, pretending not to listen. Morning washed the floor pale. Two maidservants turned to fuss over a sconce that didn't need it. At the far end, a slim figure in cream stilled like a cat, pretending to forget the stairs. The perfume arrived before the smile. Poor dove. Lady Seraphine, such a waste of silk. You wanted the cord. I want what serves the realm. The realm doesn't smell like roses. A thin pause, then a sharper smile. Careful. Grief makes girls brave in ways that get them hurt. I'm not grieving. No, you're something else. Rumors are a cheap kind of power. They're the only kind that matters in rooms like these. Enjoy them. Oh, I will. She drifted on, sweetness trailing an edge. Two junior counselors lingered by a column, eyes measuring whether misfortune was catching. One tested the word as if it might fit his mouth. Cursed. Mira kept walking. Each footfall found the floor, as if the house had agreed to share its balance. In the council chamber, Luka sat early to learn how to breathe around pain before witnesses arrived. The chair tolerated him. When the counselors filed in, he gave them the shape of a man who had slept and risen and dressed in the usual order. Majesty, the white-browed counselor placed a stack of documents like bricks. We must address succession optics. There are no optics to address. On the contrary, use your time more carefully. Elder Marcellus stood by the tall windows, light laying long fingers across his shoulder. He watched with the attention one gives a bridge crossed too often to trust. Lady Seraphine slipped into a chair at the edge as if included by a clerical error nobody noticed. I came to listen. You came to enter the conversation without being invited. Some conversations benefit from a witness. No. She tried another path. It would calm the houses if you were to signal the throne is not hesitant. Hesitation is a word for people who cannot tell patience from fear, or pride from mercy. Marcellus's voice cut softly. Plainly then, is the throne considering a new match, in time? It is not. Silence gathered. A bell in the lower yard counted 10 and spilled sound into the room like water through a crack. The white brows cleared a throat. Then a statement, to still the less charitable versions of last night. Write what you like. The signature carries more weight if... Write what you like. A runner appeared, flushed. News from the outlands. Varos near the southern ridge. Chairs creaked. Eyes brightened in ways jewels do when they catch right sun. At last, Seraphine breathed. Of course he would choose today, Marcellus murmured. Send riders, Luka said, quiet ones. We should mobilize, a young counselor pressed. We should watch. If the people think a cursed bride loosed the old lion's teeth, Seraphine said sweetly, rebels will breed in the dark while we wait. Do not bind things together because a sentence lets you, Luka answered. The young counselor tried a different angle. Majesty, rumor prefers a shape. In the hall, they say a sign appeared. A shadow. Failing candles. Candles fail when air turns. People prefer the other version. They would. Marcellus's tone stayed patient. I'll prepare 2 notes. One for the council, dry as dust. One for the common halls, brief and kind. The second will anger more houses than it comforts, the white brows warned. Let it, Marcellus replied. Luka's gaze never touched the door, but every muscle knew where it was. Ragnar prowled behind his ribs without sound. Choose the living thing, not the rumor, not the fear. I am choosing a kingdom. A kingdom chooses you back through breath, not a contract with someone you cannot stand near. The ache beneath his sternum pulsed agreement he pretended not to hear. He dismissed the council with a look that hurried chairs. Marcellus stayed. Do you want truth? Marcellus asked when they were alone. I want results. They're not always enemies. Today they are. Marcellus set 2 fingers on the map over the southern ridge. Varos is testing your taste for distraction. Don't oblige him. You think I intend to ride to the river. I think you intend to stand very still until the world decides for you. You always did enjoy being wrong with style. I enjoy being old with purpose. In the guest room, Mira stood very still inside the dark that gathers under furniture and in breath. When she opened the window, air smelled of wet stone, breakfast fires, and a hint of rain. Under it, almost too far to catch, the thread of metal and pine crept along the baseboards of her senses. She did not push it away. A careful knock. The steward requests your presence, her foster father murmured. The steward's face looked carved to save wood. He held a paper at a respectful distance. Arrangements are made for your return. Today, before dusk. Whose order? Please bring your things to the south entrance at the 2nd bell. Thank you. He blinked at the courtesy, then moved on. In the courtyard, pages ran letters toward rooms that liked the sound of their own theories. Seraphine crossed the flags, leaving roses and soft faces in her wake. 2 guards murmured about the southern ridge and a captain's pleasure at waking scouts for cause. No one saw Mira. Some part of her liked that. Back in the room, her foster mother packed with neat hands. The trunk on the floor should have needed 2 people. Mira lifted it to the bed without effort, and both of them paused. You'll need money. I have some. Not enough. I'll manage. You always do. They worked in a silence that understood help without naming it. When the 2nd bell shook the window, Mira took the trunk one-handed. Her wrist didn't bend. The steward's gaze snagged on the ease of it and slid off as if it had touched a hot pan. At the south entrance, a carriage waited with a driver who'd rather be someone else. Dust rose in small ghosts and settled. Mira stowed the trunk and climbed in. The door clicked shut, too much like the end of a chapter not yet written. She watched the palace recede without saying goodbye. The road ran under sycamores with flaking bark like maps. The city sprawled beyond, roofs like flat stones in a riverbed. People moved through morning carrying bread, carrying news, carrying the kind of attention that blisters. Cursed, a woman at a fountain whispered. Saved, a man countered. Rejected, a child sang, chasing the word without understanding. Mira closed her eyes. Let them say what they want. Nyx lay quiet inside, not absent, at ease. Truth doesn't run to keep up with mouths. It runs because it has places to be. What if the binding breaks in the street? Then it breaks where the sky can see. What if that's worse? Then you will still be you. The wheel's rhythm eased breath into its track. The driver turned into the quarter where narrow houses leaned like old men trading weather. When the carriage stopped at the small door she had learned to call hers, clouds had stitched a gray that promised little and threatened less. She stepped down and met the street with both feet. Inside, the room smelled of soap, boiled roots, and a life she had held together until last night. She unpacked slowly, using weight to keep her ribs apart. A book fell open to herb names smudged where a finger had worried at ink. A pressed leaf waited between pages. She touched it like a talisman and let herself be the kind of person who needed one. Sleep took her fast. The river returned. The stone underfoot was cool. The current spoke low. He came out of the trees not as a man in velvet, but as a shadow the size of a house with eyes like winter and fire. Ragnar stepped close without touching. The space between them burned as if a line had been drawn and lit. Her breath stuttered and then steadied. The mark laid itself where a bond would live if anyone dared make it. The dream held and then let go like a careful hand. She woke with her palm at her neck. The room was unchanged, the window the color of wet iron. Why him? The answer doesn't change because you ask standing or lying, Nick said. It changes when you decide what to do with it. Across the city, Luka slept and didn't. When the last servant left, he let a shallow doze take him. The dream took him back, the forest remembering him before he remembered himself. Ragnar was him, and beside him. The river shinned the heat from his legs. She stood on the rock and lifted her chin, and something in him knelt without consent. He moved in the shape he didn't show the court, and the mark burned the air. He woke clawing at nothing with the taste of river in his mouth. He stared at the ceiling until the old crack blurred, the one his father refused to mend because flaws teach discipline. The ache had learned new paths, moving behind his ribs and up into the roots of his eyes. He rolled to his side because the memory of the rug wouldn't let him lie on his back. The room held him like old walls do when they've been fed enough nights. Ragnar stretched, bright-eyed. You can lie here forever and call it duty, or you can get up. Where would I go? You know. I won't. Then don't ask why your chest hurts. He closed his eyes because it was cheaper than arguing. The palace had quieted. The city hissed like rain that couldn't decide. In the lower yard, a stable hand sang 3 notes over and over, as if trying to remember the 4th. The sound threaded the room and tied nothing and still mattered. Mira lay with her hand open on the coverlet and the dream's line burning without heat. She had expected to feel emptier. She didn't. Something inside kept time, deciding whether to trust her. She let it. She did not sleep again. He didn't either. The morning drew its first breath slowly, and each of them carried it awake, each with a name in their mouth that tasted like winter waiting for a thaw. The morning after felt too bright for the small rooms Mira had learned to fold herself into. Sun slid across the floorboards and picked out the scratches she knew by heart. The smell of soap and boiled roots clung to the curtains. Below the window, the lane moved as if nothing important had happened at all. A cartwheel clicking on a loose stone. A boy humming the same 3 notes. A woman knocking dust from a rag. When she listened past the noise, the world sharpened. Hinges spoke. A latch down the stair answered with a soft, metal cough. Somewhere farther off, the river pulled air through the city like a long, steady breath. Her foster mother knocked and stepped in with a folded dress and a look that tried to be normal. The dress was plain and clean. Mira slipped it on and smoothed the skirt, not because it needed it, but because the motion steadied the space between them. There is bread, her foster mother said. Eat a little. I will. People will talk today. They talked yesterday. Today they think they know a story. They know 1 sentence. Her foster mother lifted a comb and Mira sat on the stool without being asked. Teeth moved through her hair with practiced patience. Dust turned in the sun like slow snow. On the street a child laughed, bright and quick, and then a hush followed as if a name had been spoken. Cursed. Mira held still until the word lost its spike. I can go to the market, she said. You can stay in, let the day end without you. If I hide, they will decide that means something. They will decide anyway. I know. Her foster mother tied a simple braid and set the comb down. Take the small basket. On the stair, her foster father stood with a hand on the rail, listening to the house as if it might tell him something if he learned the right rhythm. He moved his hand away when she came down. He had never been unkind. He had also never been brave in ways a room could see. She kissed his cheek anyway. he started, then leaned into it, a man who did not know how to accept tenderness when it arrived without warning. Do you need coin? I have enough. The baker will raise his price if the line is long. I will choose a different baker. He nodded at the window like it had offered advice. Outside, the lane had learned a new shape. People made space without seeming to, like water parting around a stick. A woman at a stoop paused mid-fold and watched Mira pass, eyes flicking to her throat before dropping to the stone. Two boys stared with the boldness of stray dogs. The sound of her own steps settled into a pace the street could live with. She let her breath match it. Nyx moved under her skin like a hand on her spine, reminding her she had one. Listen while you walk. So she did. Beneath voices and wheels lay small truths. The cart, with a soft tire thumping once every turn. The cat landing from a wall with a muted thud. The distant rhythm of water against pilings. Under all of it beat steady hearts she could not yet count but could feel. A hum the city made when it was full of living things. The weight of it was both too much and exactly enough. She breathed until it spread and stopped pressing. At the bakery, a narrow-eyed woman lifted a tray of loaves and didn't quite look at Mira. If you want yesterday's, they're cheaper. Today's will do. They cost more. I know. The woman wrapped a loaf and set it in the basket. You are polite for someone who thinks the world owes her a crown. I never thought that. Some girls wear their hair like an apology. You haven't learned. I'm done apologizing to my own bones. The answer didn't fit the slot prepared for it. The woman's mouth twitched. She tied the twine and slid the loaf across. It will rain before noon. Keep it dry. I will. Voices gathered like birds along a wire as Mira turned away. A name carried on perfume and easy money. Seraphine. In one telling, a shadow had dimmed the altar candles. In another, Mira's skin had gone cold to the touch. In a third, the king had saved the realm from a curse. The story grew legs because it let people run without moving. She stopped at the herb stall. The keeper had once taught her thyme from oregano just because he liked a good listener. He looked up now, and, for a heartbeat, something in his eyes softened before he put patience back on. Do you need anything? He asked. I came to listen to your leaves, she said, and then added, but I won't make you nervous. There's a spell for that, he said. Tea. Take mint. Bring me nothing. I'll pay. You'll bring me nothing. They stared at each other until the argument ended by agreement. She tucked mint beneath the bread. A shoulder bumped her harder than accident. She kept her balance without thinking. The man who pushed past didn't apologize, moving too fast for a morning without a reason. Fear or purpose. She let him go. Not every tremor demanded a hand. Back in the kitchen, she reached for the water jug. The handle snapped clean in her grip. Water leaped and sheeted across the boards. Her foster mother gasped. Mira stood still, the handle in her hand nearly weightless. I'm sorry, she started, then stopped herself. Her foster mother looked from the jug to Mira's fingers. That jug is older than you. It was old today. It didn't break last week when I dropped it. I wasn't holding it last week. A silence that could have turned to fear chose a different shape. Her foster mother blew out a breath that wobbled into a laugh. We'll dry the floor. I will. Heat flushed across Mira's palms without pain as she knelt to wipe. The boards warmed where her hands pressed. When she lifted them, the water was already thinning into a dull stain as if it had rained there last week and decided that was enough. Her foster father walked in with kindling, stopped like a man in a room that had changed temperature, then blinked and looked around for ordinary reasons. She narrowed the weight inside herself until the air eased. He shook his head and found a smile. I'll start the fire. I can. I will. In the alley behind the house, damp wood and a territorial cat drew simple lines in the air. Mira closed her eyes and let steps sort themselves by weight. A girl ran with soft slaps, toes first. A man dragged a right foot from a loom scar. A guard walked like the ground owed him more than he had earned. When she opened her eyes, nothing rushed her. The day could wait. Your strength is yours, Nick said, quiet and certain. You do not have to prove it. You do not have to hide it for them either. I will not break the next jug. You will not. And if I do, then we will sweep. Mira almost smiled and didn't. She made tea with the mint, drank it too hot on purpose, felt it climb and wake rooms inside her that had been closed. Across the river, the palace had drawn its curtains against the same sun. In Luka's chambers, the air held the sour of coals, and the clean thread of river lodged in his coat. He sat at the map table with both hands braced as if the wood needed holding. Pain had learned new paths and walked them like a guard on schedule. Fine tremors ran along the tendons of his hands. He kept his palms down to hide the line. You are not winning, Ragnar said from the corner where wolves wait. I know. Go to her. No. Then do not pretend you're confused by what it costs. It costs less than kneeling to a mistake. Silence carried more contempt than a growl. A knuckle tapped the door twice in Marcellus's rhythm. Luka did not say enter. Marcellus let himself in, closed the door, and stood there a beat, as if wearing the room's weight until it remembered how to sit. You look like a man who outstared a mirror. He set a small leather case on the table. Tonic. It won't fix what you insist on breaking. It will get you past morning. You can waste breath arguing while you drink it. What do you want? The same thing I wanted when your father's curse taught me what a house sounds like when it's losing its roof. Stop pretending a bond is a choice you can think away. I won't be lectured into a leash. You're already wearing one, it's called pride. Luka took the case because refusing medicine in front of a man who had already seen him on a floor would be theater, and he had no strength left for a show. The swallow burned and pushed the ache to a different chair. Faros is near the southern ridge, Marcellus said, testing fences that bite once and forget. I sent riders. Quiet ones. Loud ones feed a rumor I don't enjoy. Seraphine has been feeding it since dawn. She says the girl is cursed. She says the candles failed. Candles fail when air shifts. People prefer the other version. They would. It will be easier to admit you were wrong than to explain to a realm why you are dying. I'm not dying. Not this morning. The tonic is good. Marcellus pulled a folded paper from his coat and set it by the map. If you won't go to her, stop pretending you don't know where she is. Do you know who you're speaking to? To the man my bones tell me is bound to a girl who will save his life if he lets her. Get out. Marcellus inclined his head and left without turning his back. The door closed softly, like both men refused to teach the corridor another story. Luka stared at the paper a long time, then pushed it aside without opening it. He cracked the window. The day slid in with iron and pine, and a clean note he refused to name. He shut it, and stood until standing felt like leather under strain, and then sat again because the chair remembered his weight. In the small kitchen, a neighbor left sugared buns on the step and nearly fled when Mira opened the door. I was just leaving these. Thank you. I heard you were going back. I'm already where I came from. Oh. You can tell them the sky didn't split when you stood on my step. The woman bit back a nervous laugh. Oh, you look well. I am. Rain arrived exactly when the baker said it would. Big drops first, then a steady ribbon that made the street shine. Mira watched people decide what kind of person they were in sudden weather. Some ran and laughed at their own hurry. Some tucked their shoulders and trusted it. Some glared at the sky like it had broken a promise. The man who had bumped her walked past with a hat pressed hard to old scars across 3 knuckles. A guard threw a cloak over an old woman's shoulders and didn't wait to be thanked. Do not let them tell you what your name means, Nick said. They will anyway. Be louder without raising your voice. How? Stand, breathe. Do not flinch when your strength answers you. She turned from the window and the air turned with her like opening a door she had walked past all her life. Her spine lengthened without permission. Heat moved low with purpose that had nothing to do with shame. Her foster father came in with wood and paused as if he had stepped into warmer weather. She narrowed the weight inside herself, and the air eased. He shook his head like a dog shedding rain, and found a small smile. "I'll make the fire. I can. I will." The flame caught and chased chill out. The mint tea had cooled. She drank it anyway. By mid-afternoon, whispers had found fresh mouths, and the city had taught itself to use her name as a test of who held still and who flinched. She reached the high shelf for a jar. The old ache in her shoulder did not appear. Glass lifted lightly, as if it had been waiting to be trusted. She set it down without ceremony. Her foster mother watched from the hearth. "I don't know what we are now," she said. "I know what you are to me." "I know." Near dusk, the lane filled with people pretending to do chores within seeing distance. A child stomped a bun flat in the mud and looked pleased. A boy leaned against a wall, trying to be invisible. Mira opened the door and stepped onto the stoop, because hiding was a promise she had decided to stop keeping. "Are you well?" someone asked. "I am." "Good." "Will you leave the city?" "No." "Oh." "Does it hurt?" a child blurted. "Only when I let it." "What helps?" "Standing." The child nodded like he was putting the answer in a pocket. Faces loosened back into errands. Hunger beat gossip by dinner. Mira closed the door. The light had gone honey soft. Her foster father hummed the same 3 notes, still reaching for the 4th. The room breathed. Her chest did too, without scraping. Nix's voice arrived in daylight, clean and sure, without needing a shadow or a dream. "You are not what they think. You are Alpha." The words settled deep and did not crush. They didn't ask for witnesses. They didn't need a hall. They unwrapped what had been wrapped without tearing it. Her eyes stung and did not spill. She set her palms on the table, and the wood held. And for once, that was enough. Rain washed the city clean by noon, and the palace tried to pretend the storm hadn't changed anything. The council chamber smelled of wet cloaks and ink. Luka kept his hand still on the arms of the chair, the kind of still that costs. The ache beneath his sternum waited until he forgot it, and then reminded him, without mercy. Whispers moved behind parchment. A young lord with 2 new rings lowered his voice and raised it in the same breath. Lady Seraphine drifted in late and made lateness look like privilege. She chose a seat near the windows where the light could find her. Reports from the outer wards, the white-browed counselor began. Frayed tempers, petty theft, a narrative in the markets. "What kind?" Luka asked. "That the bond was refused because a sign fell across the altar. Candles fail when air shifts. People prefer the other version." Seraphine's eyes slid, catching one gaze and then another. "Fear needs a face. It will pick the girls." Her tone wore concern like jewelry. "The houses are uneasy. The outlands watch. Varos is seen and unseen. Varos breathes when we give him air." Luka's voice stayed iron. "We won't." Ragnar did not keep to silence. "Go to her." "No," Luka answered without moving his mouth. Elder Marcellus stood in the tall light like an old tree. "The southern ridge is quiet," he said. "Too quiet. If Varos is near, he's listening for missteps." "Then we won't give him one." Grain tallies and a broken culvert filled the next minutes, the small wars that feed big ones. Luka kept answers short and breathing even. When the chamber emptied, Seraphine lingered with a last, sweet look meant to bruise later. He let the door shut on it and not on him. By evening, the rain had dried into the smell of damp stone. Mira left the house quietly and took the path toward the strip of woodland at the city's edge. The lane softened into dirt and low grass, then to the warm, packed earth of a trail rabbits trusted. She slipped off her shoes at a thorn bush and set her feet on soil that knew her better than most rooms. "Listen," Nix breathed. "I am. Not with fear, with bone." She slowed until each step taught her something. The wind carried iron from a distant shed, the sour of turned compost, the wet fur of a fox an hour gone. The understory hummed, beetles shifting in leaf litter, a vole learning the cost of noise, an owl testing air with its wings, silent and still, somehow loud to everything that listened. Heartbeats found her. A mouse flickered near her ankle. Farther left, a deer beat slow and sure. Behind her, higher on the slope, a larger rhythm matched hers without trying. Her lungs forgot air for one beat and learned it again. She didn't turn. She let awareness widen like a pool when a stone slips in and doesn't splash. Ragnar lifted his nose in Luka's skull. Closer. Quiet, Luka thought. He was shadow among trees, cloak dark, coat darker, the gold of his eyes snagged in leaves if anyone bothered to look up. He had meant to inspect the South Watch and return with nothing to confess. His feet had turned toward the wood without his permission. He told himself he was tracing Varos through hedge and ditch. The lie held at court. Out here, the edges frayed. The path dipped into a shallow gully where stormwater had run. Mud held stories, the small crescents of deer, paired commas of a dog whose owner had cut across the field. Deeper, careless marks crisscrossed the hedge gap. Boots. Several. Newer than afternoon. Learn the pattern, Nix urged. Mira crouched and touched a print. The edge was clean. The heel had sunk hard on one side. The stride lengthened into the gully, then shortened where the ground climbed. Under a hawthorn, the print stuttered like a man settling to wait. A thread of scent slid down the hill. Stale sweat, old leather, cheap oil over metal. Not a city guard, not a farmer. Wolves who had let their human choices rot. Ragnar's claws scored thought. There. I see it. Luka breathed into silence. The ache sharpened as if excited. He counted space the way he counted floors at the palace. 5 strides to the hawthorn, 3 to the bend, 8 to circle wide and come from the flank. Mira stepped off the path. The prints angled toward the thin fence that marked the village boundary. A lamp glowed beyond, warm and ordinary. A child laughed, muffled by a wall. She walked toward the wrong. They slid out of the hedge, 3 shapes and a 4th catching a branch. Hoods up. Faces only a suggestion. The wrong smell clung to them. The one in front lifted his hand to make a harmless shape he didn't mean. Pretty night. Pass through. Road's narrow. There's room. Depends what for. Words skittered and found no new shapes to wear. The second man scanned her posture, looking for the ordinary fear he knew how to spend. His head tipped, uncertain. The hedge to her right hissed where the 4th misjudged a thorn. Enough, Nick said. Heat spread through Mira's muscles, not fire, not rage. Readiness. She took a step forward and made the space smaller. The leader reached for bravado and found it thin. We just want to look. Then look. He looked and didn't like what he found. He snapped his fingers. The 4th came out grinning the way someone grins when breaking things is a hobby. Don't, Mira said, and let the weight inside her stop being polite. It left her like weather. It filled the path. Bodies knew it, even if eyes couldn't see it. The leader's breath shortened. The grin stalled. The second reached for a knife and found his hand didn't want to. One lunged anyway, clumsy with habit. She turned her shoulders, let his momentum pass, clipped his arm with her forearm, and set him on a knee without breaking anything. He stared up, more shocked than hurt, like a dog taught a rule it had never learned. The leader surged in close. She pivoted and set a palm flat to his chest with pressure that should not have belonged to her size. He staggered, tripped on the gully edge, and went down hard enough to lose pride. A lamp bobbed toward the fence. Voices carried the way news wants to. The second man slashed at air to feel taller. Mira didn't give him fear to eat. Nyx swelled in her throat, a low sound no human ear could hear and every human body felt. Go. Leave, Mira said. They didn't move fast enough. She stepped again, the pressure rising. Not a shout, a storm settling. The leader grabbed the fourth by the coat and dragged him backward. The second reevaluated his life and stepped away. The hedge took them, rustle and wrong scent thinning into cleaner dark. A man peered through the fence. You there, are you hurt? I'm whole. What did they want? To be braver than they are. You alone? Not really. He weighed questions, picked one he could carry home. We'll set extra watch. Do. In the trees, Luka's breath stretched. The ache steadied with the retreat of wrong. Ragnar pressed, proud. See her? I saw. Give in. No. He should step out. He didn't. He let leaves hide him and waited while she stood still until the forest's beat aligned again. He watched her retrieve her shoes, careful of the thorn bush like someone who understood bargains with small, sharp things. When she turned toward the city, he moved too. Far enough to lie about later. Word ran ahead. By the lane it had grown teeth and wings. Bandits, rogues, a girl who made air heavy. A hedge that bowed. A man who fell like he'd been struck by nothing. The rumor put claws in her hands or a shadow at her back. No one noticed her feet finding ground. That was the part that mattered. At her corner, a runner intercepted her with a face fixed in urgent courtesy. By order of the crown, your presence is required. For what? Questioning. The word tried to cut. It dulled on her calm. She handed the basket to her foster father with a ribbon, simple line. I'll be back. She followed the runner through streets that wanted a parade and had to settle for a march. Torches rimmed the arches. Guards straightened without knowing why when she passed. Light through the long throat of the main corridor into golden shadow. An usher opened a side room designed to intimidate. She paused at the threshold and let it look at her first, then stepped in. A table stood with a glass of water posed like kindness. She didn't sit. The room breathed an old, slow breath. The door clicked shut. Luka came after a weight calibrated to look like control. Black cut exact lines against the torchlight. The ache had lost ground to tonic and pride. Enough to let him cross the floor like a man who had learned grace from standing near blades. He stopped across the table. The space between them felt like a bridge over a river in thaw. Explain the disturbance near the boundary. Men in the hedge, they left. Because of you. Because they chose to leave. You forced their choice, They met something they didn't understand. What was that? You already know. Silence took shape. Torchlight lifted the hollow under his cheekbone and made his mouth look crueler than it was. He didn't change it. Kindness would be remembered as debt by mouths that liked to forget. Did you harm them? No. You could have. Yes. Why didn't you? There was no need. You felt the need. I felt the line. His eyes darkened a shade, the iron loosening for a breath. The river looked through. It wasn't mercy. It was something that remembered mercy and missed it. He set both hands on the table. The wood accepted the weight like it had accepted worse. Rumor says you cursed the hall. Rumor is bored. Rumor has teeth. Then feed it something true. Who are you to give orders? Someone you refuse to know. The sentence landed and stayed. Ragnar pushed, delighted. More. You will not speak like that here, Luka said, voice low. It doesn't matter where. It does. Not to the truth. Heat rolled through his chest like weather breaking. The tonic lost ground. Pain lifted a clean knife and set it under his ribs. He didn't reach for the glass. He had made rooms quake with less effort. She didn't quake. That unmade something he didn't have a name for. Why did you leave your home? I don't hide. You will if I order it. You can try. Their voices didn't rise, the air rose. Torches burned steadier as if the room had thickened. A guard outside straightened, breathing harder, without moving. The runner rubbed his arms and didn't know why. "Do you think yourself above the law?" "No." "Then answer." "I am." "What woke in the hedge?" "What you refused." The latch clicked softly, Wood wanting to stay out of it. Luka leaned in. The world leaned with him. "Say it." "You can." Ragnar's joy shook his bones. "She will not kneel." Mira felt the room changing shape the way stormlight changes a field. Nyx rose full. No whisper now. A presence that used her body like a cathedral uses air. "Stand." She did without moving. The force she had kept careful uncurled. It filled the chamber without touching a thing. The table hummed in its joints. Shadows in the corners drew back as if they had learned manners. Luka's breath hitched once, then again. The guard laid a palm to the door, eyes wide. The aura reached Luka like tied on stone. For an impossible second he felt something he hadn't since the curse's first cut, his body remembering ease. The ache faltered. Breath came clean. Ragnar went to his knees in raw delight. "Alpha." Mira's gaze held his. "Do you feel it?" He did. He hated that he did. Pride flared like dry straw, then failed against relief. "Stop," he managed. "I'm not doing anything, I'm being." The air brightened not with light but with attention. The room turned its face toward her. Somewhere in old bones the palace wolves lifted their heads. Outside, an owl turned to watch the windows. The aura pressed once more, polite and inexorable. Luka's hands curled and relaxed because there was no use pretending he didn't want the breath he finally had. Behind a screened lattice in the listening gallery, someone shifted. The faintest trace of roses seeped and soured. The pull between them sang a note only they could hear. It wasn't pretty. It was true. It braided promise and threat until they sounded like the same word. The aura held at its peak the sweetest and most dangerous balance. The guard outside whispered without meaning to. "Alpha." The word slipped under the door and lay between them. The room went very still, as if it knew a line had been crossed and would not uncross. The guard's whisper hung in the air like a dropped coin that refused to settle. The room held its breath. The aura thinned by a hair, and the world rushed back in, loud with the small sounds power makes when it remembers itself. Luka didn't move. He looked at the space between them as if it had grown teeth. Mira stood without flinching, the pressure now contained inside skin that finally fit. The screen in the gallery stirred. Lace scraped wood. Perfume bled through and soured in heat. The panel clicked and swung on its hinge. Seraphine stepped out as if the room belonged to her by birthright. She took in the scene and made a soft shape of her mouth that wasn't surprise. "A trick." Mira didn't look at her. "A parlor effect." No answer. "False alpha." Elder Marcellus filled the doorway before the guard could stammer the apology in his throat. He took one look, measured the air like a physician in a sick room, and lifted his hand. The guard straightened on instinct. Seraphine's chin tipped higher, but her eyes slid off the aura that still clung to the table's edge like weather reluctant to leave a hilltop. "Out," Marcellus said, not raising his voice. Seraphine didn't move. "I came to observe. You will read a summary. This concerns the realm. It concerns the king's life." The last word found a seam in the room and widened it. Seraphine weighed the risk of staying against the cost of being escorted. She lowered her lashes the way people do when they disguise retreat as grace and passed close enough to Mira to let the roses try, and fail, to cover the smell of fear. "Careful, Dove." Mira watched the door close and didn't carry the word with her. Marcellus drew the bolt with a simple, heavy sound. He stood between them and divided the air. Luka still hadn't moved from the line his body had drawn at the table. His hands were open, fingers relaxed, not by calm, but by calculation. He didn't reach for the chair. He didn't reach for her. "Majesty," Marcellus said. No. We are past no. Say what you came to say. Marcellus placed a small, oil-dark bundle on the table and opened it with the care of a man unveiling a weapon in a temple. Inside lay a piece of thread, thin as hair and black as midnight sap, sealed under glass. Beside it, 3 brittle leaves pressed flat, their veins traced in silver ink. Records from the midwives' hall, he said, marked with a sigil that belongs to the old binders. A child hidden, scent wrapped, not removed, protected. Luka's gaze cut to the thread and back. He did not let interest show. It showed anyway. From where? A village across the river. The marks say what they always say when fear chooses caution over truth. Hide your scent, hide your light. There are men who hunt, and they don't always knock. Mira's throat went cold and hot together. The marks on the leaves matched the memory that had lived under her skin like a faded bruise. A bowl of salt, a pestle, heavy as a prayer, a woman's humming that had not been a song. Names, Luka said. None that matter and none that would survive a court's appetite. But the ink is old and honest. This was done to keep a child breathing. The ache under Luka's sternum lifted like a beast raising its head. He pressed his tongue to the back of his teeth to ground himself and tasted iron and mint and something clean that had no place in a throne room but had arrived anyway. Ragnar stepped closer to the space between them and put his muzzle down like a wolf greeting another at last. We know her. Nyx moved inside Mira with a readiness that felt like the sound a bow makes before it sings. We always did. This proves nothing, Luka said. It proves enough, Marcellus answered. Enough to stop you pretending your body is lying to you. Enough to show the old binders feared stroke more than gossip. Leave us. Marcellus didn't argue. He gathered the thread and leaves and wrapped them again, then left them on the table, as if to remind the room of the promise they represented. He looked at Mira briefly. Not pity, not awe, only the recognition of a shape finally standing inside its outline. He unbolted the door, stepped through, and bolted it behind him. Silence folded down. Torchlight breathed. Luka and Mira faced each other like 2 edges that would cut cleaner if they met. Do not perform in my halls again, Luka said. It wasn't performance. Then learn restraint. I have lived restraint. I am done apologizing to my bones. You mistake defiance for strength. You mistake pride for law. The words threw sparks. Neither of them stepped back. The air ran between them and came away heated. You think one trick in a hedge makes you a queen. I think nothing you think I think. You will not tell me what I think. I am not telling you, I am refusing your version of me. Ragnar pressed a laugh against Luka's ribs, delighted with the cut and the clean bleed. She is not soft. Do you hear how the ground loves her? Remove your weight from my halls, Luka said, each word filed down to blade. When called upon to do so. Ask and see. His breath thinned. He forced it wider with the same discipline he had used to survive winters and inherit wars. You are no one. Then why do you breathe better in my presence? The question struck with the accuracy of a thrown knife. For a second the ache faltered, drawn back like a tide. The relief made him furious. Fury made him honest. Because my father made choices that kill men like me slowly, he said, raw. Because a prophet dragged a curse through our bloodline and called it justice. Because fools built a throne on a story they didn't understand. Because my body is treacherous. Your body is trying to live. Not at any cost. Your pride is not a cost the realm can afford. Do not speak of my realm. It will be yours when you stop dying for it. The bite of the sentence went straight to the place where the curse kept its ledger. He took a step around the table without noticing he'd moved until he was in the open, the line between them unguarded. She didn't retreat. The room became smaller and more honest. Tell me why you left your house tonight. I needed to breathe. The forest offers that freely. You needed to be seen. I am done being invisible. You needed me to see you. That is your hunger, not mine. It hit where she meant it to. Heat flared up his throat in something that wasn't pain and wasn't anger and refused to be named. He wanted to undo the distance he had insisted on. He wanted to erase her and swallow the relief in the same minute. He wanted to stand on the ridge and howl denial until his voice broke and then do it again anyway. Ragnar set his weight steady as winter. "Stop lying to your bones." Nyx eased closer to the line until the wolves could measure each other's breath. "He keeps calling absence honor. He will learn." "I will not choose you," Luka said. "You already did, then you refused it." "I will not bind. You'd rather die?" "If that is the cost." "It is not noble to make corpses of yourself where a vow would do." The air changed. A shift as precise as the click of a lock. He felt it, and the ache moved fast as a blade changing hands, clean and sure. He held her gaze because he had learned a long time ago that predators take what your eyes offer first. This one didn't. This one offered steadiness and let him walk into it. "Do you think this is about sweetness?" he asked. "About kindness, about love? I think you want excuses dressed as crowns. I think you came to my hall to force my hand. I came to exist, not in my sight." She tilted her head. "You can close your eyes." He swallowed once, twice, and found no water. The glass on the table might as well have been a mile away. The tonic's grace had thinned to memory. The curse changed tactics. It ran a new line beneath his skin, straight through the cage of his ribs, and turned. The world dimmed while still bright, the way a room dims when someone tells the truth too fast. "Do not come closer," he said low. "I haven't moved." "Then stop being near. I am where I am." The room tipped. He caught himself against nothing and found nothing. Pride threw him a rope and missed. The floor rose quiet and sure. She crossed the distance in 3 steps. Her hands were steady because they had learned steadiness without being allowed to practice on anything safe. She caught his shoulder and softened the fall into a kneel that could be mistaken for choosing. The carpet accepted him. His breath sawed once, twice. He looked up and she was there, close enough to count the silver in her eyes. He expected triumph. He met fury and fear, and a tenderness that refused to call itself by name. "Don't touch me," he forced him. "You're already in my hands." Ragnar roared until the rafters knew it. "Claim." Nyx answered without flinch. "He will or he won't. Keep him alive until he decides." "If you don't claim me, you will die," Mira said. "Not cruel, not begging. The way you tell someone the price of a thing and let them choose if they can afford it." He closed his eyes because pride had no better plan. The breath came shallow again and refused to stay. The ache moved inward like winter moving in behind a door left ajar. "Help," he whispered, and the word didn't sound like him. "You can help yourself." "How?" "Let your wolf stop dragging you." Ragnar surged to the front, joy shot through with grief for the time wasted. "Let me breathe with her." The line in Luka's jaw eased by a fraction. He did not speak the vow. He didn't have to for a heartbeat's worth of mercy. The pressure in the room shifted where only wolves could feel it. Nyx leaned in. Breath touched breath. The curse recoiled in surprise and then doubled back with rage. Relief cut out. Pain slapped down like a black wave. His body jerked once. A man pulled from a dream he couldn't keep. Mira moved with it and kept his head from striking the floor. She lowered him the way you lower a blade you intend to use again. The door thudded under the guard's fist. "Majesty." "Wait," Mira said, not looking away from Luka's face. When we heard, "Wait." The guard's boots shifted. Silence pressed its ear to the gap. In the walls, the old wolves that haunted beams and stones paced, restless with the taste of almost. Mira checked the color of Luka's mouth and the speed of his pulse. It skittered, then steadied weakly against her thumb. Heat radiated off him like a forge learning to cool. She could feel where the curse had laid tracks under his ribs, burned in roads a body shouldn't know. She set her palm lightly at his sternum, not to heal, not to conjure, only to lend weight to a place that kept forgetting how to belong to itself. His eyes opened a sliver. Gold found her dim and furious and raw. Do not pity me. I don't. What do you want? Breath. For me. For you. For me. For what lives because we do. He tried to laugh. It hurt. He swallowed it and closed his eyes again because the world was easier to hold in the dark when pride had to sit on the floor with you. She felt his body shiver once, the aftershock of a choice almost made. The bolt scraped. Marcellus slipped through the smallest space he could make. He took in the scene without spectacle, the king on his knees in a careful fall, the girl braced, the room leaning toward them, as if listening. Send for the physician, he told the guard, who vanished as if glad to be commanded. He knelt on the other side and smelled the air the way old men do who remember forests. How long? Long enough. Can he stand? When the room stops moving. Luka's breath evened by a hair, then caught, then found a ragged rhythm again. Marcellus put 2 fingers to the thread at his neck and nodded, satisfied and angry in equal measure. You have a choice, he said to Luka, very quiet. I will not say which. Only that you are out of time to pretend there is a third. Luka didn't answer. His hand twitched, not reaching, refusing to be seen reaching. Mira ignored the refusal and stayed. Seraphine's perfume crept under the door like a rumor testing a lock. Voices gathered in the corridor and thinned when Marcellus turned his head toward the wood with the weight of a man who could still banish without shouting. The castle learned a new silence. Mira looked at the thread and the leaves on the table and the man whose body had tried to bury itself on a floor rather than admit it needed her. She looked at her own hands on a king and did not flinch. Nyx breathed with her steady as a drum. If he lives, it will be because we did not let shame be the loudest thing in the room. I won't beg, Mira said, not to Luka, not to Marcellus, to the part of the night that would carry the sentence to whoever needed to hear it. I won't crawl. I will stand where I stand and be what I am. If it kills him, it won't be because I refuse to hold him up. Gold opened under lashes. Pride stared out and, for once, did not argue. He looked at her face the way a man looks at a road he does not want and knows he will walk. His eyes closed again. Slow. The physician hurried in with a bag that clinked. He stopped short, bowed out of reflex, and set to work with hands that learned what not to tremble for a living. He pressed, listened, poured a bitter measure past Luka's lips, waited for swallow and got it. He spoke to Marcellus in terms that would sound like furniture to anyone else. Keep him down, keep the room cool, keep words few. Mira eased back enough to give the physician space and stayed close enough to catch him if the world tried to take him again. The aura that had filled the chamber earlier settled around her like a cloak with edges tucked in. It didn't flare. It kept watch. Ragnar sprawled on the stone inside Luka and refused to move away from the place where Nyx's breath had touched him. We are not done. No, Nyx agreed. The physician straightened. He will sleep or he will not. I cannot force either. Marcellus nodded once. The guard cleared the corridor. The door drifted mostly shut. Mira stayed where she was, knees complaining at the stone and being ignored. She studied the face of a man who had told the world he needed no one, and found instead a body that had begun to ask for mercy in its own language. She let her anger be honest and let her fear be small, and let something tender sit between them, without a name. Outside, the palace wolves settled. The torches hissed. The river pulled the city's breath through its long throat. The night moved one finger on the clock of this story and stopped. Luka slept finally, pulled under not by trust but by exhaustion that sounded enough like it to fool a guard dog. Marcellus watched the curve of breath and the twitch of pain easing, and took the chair that hurt his knees the least. He kept his eyes on the door. He kept his attention on the floor. He kept his faith in things that do not care for witnesses. Mira stayed. The room learned the shape of her presence and did not complain. When she looked at Luka again, she did not think of crowns. She thought of lungs. She thought of a thread wrapped around a child's wrist. She thought of the bridge that had appeared between two bodies, and the river underneath, waiting to test it. "If he doesn't claim you, he will die," Nyx had said. The sentence still sat on the flagstones where it had fallen, simple and immovable. Mira placed her hand beside it, and did not move it away. The morning after the palace learned a new silence, the city decided it would do the opposite. Rumor ran like water, finding every low place. It carried Mira's name and the word aura in the same breath, then swapped aura for curse when it found a mouth that preferred teeth. Two children at the pump tried to walk the way they imagined a queen would, chins up, elbows stiff. One of them hissed like a snake. The other puffed out cheeks and wobbled as if power were a weight too big to carry. When Mira passed, their play folded into stillness. The older one blurted it anyway, the safety of distance in his eyes even though he stood only 3 steps away. "Cursed bride." The words landed and skittered like pebbles on a hard road. Mira stopped. The boy's face tightened, already braced for anger. She didn't give him any. She crouched and dipped the bucket into the pump trough, lifted it in one hand, and set it gently on the stone shelf, not as a trick, just as a reminder to herself that weight and balance had become honest with her at last. "Keep your elbows loose," she told him. "Power doesn't like stiff arms." He stared. The smaller child bit a laugh in half and swallowed it. When Mira walked on, their voices bumped against each other, new and unsure. Behind her, an old woman by a window rattled shutters on purpose so a neighbor would have a reason to look out and start a conversation with a sigh already loaded. Her foster mother waited at the door with a dish towel in one hand and a prayer someone had tried to fold small enough to fit in a pocket in the other. She stuffed the prayer deeper when she saw Mira lift the bucket without effort. "You don't owe them your face," she said. "They already took it." "Then keep what they didn't." "I will." Her foster father hovered in the doorway to the back room, pretending to be busy with hinges that worked fine. His eyes moved the way a man's do when he is trying to keep track of the weather and his daughter at once. When Mira crossed the room, he touched her elbow, awkward and careful, as if asking forgiveness for the care at the same time he offered it. By midday, the market had learned to make her absence part of its rhythm. Buying bread for dinner took too long because the baker's wife needed to sell every customer a little more opinion with the loaf. Mira made a small island of calm around her and stood on it until the line stopped using her name to pass the time. She carried mint and onions and the kind of quiet that people mistake for surrender until it holds their eyes. Nyx stayed close under her skin, not a whisper, a certainty. "They do not get to name you. Names are tools. Use the ones that fit your hand." "What do I call myself?" Mira asked inside the slow shape of afternoon. "Alive." Across the river, the council room traded wet cloaks for rumors like for like. The long table's polish shone with the reflection of hands that wanted to count votes before the arguments started. Luka sat at the head of the table, the way a cliff sits at the edge of a sea, offering shape while enduring everything that hits it. The ache beneath his sternum had learned to be patient in public. Patience cost. The white-browed counselor opened his folder and arranged parchment as if the neatness of pages could organize a day. "Petitions from the Southern Quarter," he began. "The market wants reassurance. The guilds want patrols doubled. The Bakers Association requests subsidies if curfew returns." "We don't have curfew," Luka said, and they enjoy planning for it. "Next." Lady Seraphine slid into her chair with a rustle the table had already learned to hear as a preface to trouble. She wore cream again, the color of a blade disguised as innocence. "There is also the matter of last night's incident," she offered lightly. "The guards report a pressure in the air. The listening gallery reports raised voices. The corridor reports your collapse." A younger lord with too many rings flinched at her last word as if she had dropped a coin that might roll under his chair and make him chase it. Luka didn't allow his face to change. "The corridor reports nothing," he said. "It does when one whispers to it," Seraphine answered. and when one stands in it long enough to learn which doors breathe and which hold their breath. Elder Marcellus stood with his hands behind his back, not speaking yet. His eyes felt their way around the room the way a veteran's fingers find old scars without looking, counting what can hold and what will break. "The girl," Seraphine continued and gave the word a shape like a bruise. "She is not just nothing. She is a danger." "To whom?" Marcellus asked mildly. "To the order that keeps the city from tearing the palace down brick by brick when it thinks it smells weakness." "She revealed an aura," another counselor put in quickly, trying to be useful to whichever side of the room he would prefer later. "Reports vary. Ale was involved." "Of course Ale was involved," Seraphine said. "But even without it, the story is enough. Children practice how to mock a queen in the street. Wives whisper they feel the air change when she passes. Children practice everything we model for them," Marcellus said. The white-browed counselor tapped a parchment he didn't need to read. "The guard captain says Veros has been seen near the ridges 3 times in 10 days. "Veros breathes when we give him air," Luka said. "Stop giving him ours." Seraphine's mouth softened while her eyes sharpened. "Majesty, forgive me, but pretending we didn't see something doesn't unmake it. Exile the girl. The houses sleep better. The city calms. The outlands lose a toy. Your strength becomes the story again." Ragnar pressed his weight in Luka's body the way a wolf presses into a door that won't open fast enough. "You choke on your own lies." Luka didn't look at him. He kept his jaw still. "We do not exile citizens because the corridor learned a word." "Then leash her." "We don't leash wolves who haven't bitten." "She did bite," Seraphine said softly. "She bit the air and made it kneel." Marcellus turned his head. "A thing's ability to make air kneel doesn't make it a monster." "It makes it a problem," Seraphine returned. "Some problems are answers you don't like." Seraphine let the lines of her face relax into regret. "I admire your faith. I prefer safety." Ragnar's humor raked claws along Luka's ribs. "She would leash you too if leashes bought her a crown." The ache moved under Luka's bones with intent. He set both hands flat on the table in a position that passed for ease in rooms like this. The movement steadied him long enough to finish the meeting without showing the sweat under the collar that refused to cool. "Deal with the petitions," he told the table. "Increase the night watch near the ridge without letting them look like a parade. As for the rest, this council will not be used to launder gossip into policy." When the room emptied, Seraphine was the last to rise. She paused at his shoulder long enough to let a thin thread of perfume slip into the seam of his coat. "You are not the only one who knows how to keep a kingdom alive," she murmured, and left before the words could find anything to catch on. Luka remained until the walls remembered how to be walls and not witnesses. The tonic Marcellus had forced on him earlier bought another hour. That hour spent itself recklessly every time the memory of a river wash scent found him. He dismissed 2 pages with a look that sent them bowing backward, then held himself upright until the corridor had the courtesy to run out of eyes. In the small house, dusk folded itself into corners with the confidence of a guest who knows where the cups are kept. Mira bent over a pot and watched onions surrender to heat. The day had left grit on her tongue that no amount of mint could wash away. Her foster mother moved quietly, making the small sounds that keep a house honest. A drawer closing, a spoon set down, a breath caught and let go. "What did they say?" she asked at last. "They said the air felt heavy when I passed. Air changes when it wants to rain. And when people choose a story." Her foster father laid bread on the table with the care of a man who understands offerings. He looked like he wanted to ask a question and had put so many polite clothes on it that it didn't know itself anymore. "Do you need me to walk with you in the morning?" he managed. "I need you to keep living like you did before yesterday," Mira said gently. "That helps more than walking." He nodded and pretended to fix a chair leg to hide relief. When they ate, they did it the way people do when they need food to be useful. Quickly, with gratitude that does not need to be seen to count. Sleep took Mira as if it had been waiting at the edge of the bed with a hand out. She slid under and stood at the river again. The stone was cool under her feet. The night smelled like pine and iron and the first day after winter. She looked up and he was there. Not the king in black, not the man with a jaw taught to refuse softness, but the shadow of his wolf. Ragnar stepped out of the trees, huge, eyes lit. He didn't growl. He simply stood and let her see the size of him. Nyx moved beside her, no longer a shy shape, a presence with pause and breath and weight. You are not prey. She already knew. The knowing filled her bones and then settled so it wasn't loud anymore. Ragnar paced once and stopped close enough that she could feel heat through air. Not a demand, an acknowledgement. You breathe him, Nyx said, and I hate that. You can hate the truth and still need it. I won't crawl. No. Ragnar's gaze warmed and didn't blink. She belongs to us. Nyx did not flinch. He belongs to himself, and to the bond we didn't ask for and will not undo. Mira woke with her throat tight and her hands not empty for once. Dawn balanced on the windowsill, like a coin that might fall either way. She sat up and let the room settle around her. The dream didn't vanish when she opened her eyes. It stepped back and agreed to wait. The day began again with whispers and work and too many eyes. Children drew a circle with chalk on the cobbles and took turns standing in it, then stepping out as if the air inside were heavier. Mira watched a moment from the corner of the lane and then kept moving. By the second bell, she had worn patience thin and found resolve beneath it, when a woman at a stall flung the word witch in the same voice she used to call a cat. Mira didn't stop. Nyx pressed a steadying palm along her ribs. You do not need to teach every mouth a lesson. I want to, Mira confessed. Teach the ones who can listen. Across the river, the steward caught Marcellus outside the archive with a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth. The old man had already dug half the city's memory out of corners that didn't want to give it up. He took the bundle with the tenderness you offer fragile truths and carried it into a room with a window that didn't quite shut, the better to let the dust out when it tried to multiply. He laid out each sheet with fingers that remembered ink and candles, and the way a certain binder's hand slanted on the page when the hour got late. The marks were older than some laws, and younger than the mountains. A child bound because hunters passed within a mile 3 nights in a row. A mother who knew enough to sit on a floor without crying because crying teaches the wrong lesson to a night like that. A thread drawn around a small wrist and tied with a knot that asked the moon to wait. Marcellus read until his eyes burned and then closed them. He saw the thread. He saw the leaves pressed flat. He saw a girl standing on a river stone. He had no patience left for kings who mistook pride for medicine. By late afternoon, laughter in the city had remembered it had a job to do. Laughter keeps markets selling and children playing, even when grown-ups try to scare them into silence. The moment didn't last. A man near the pump said the wrong thing loud, and 3 others agreed out of habit, and Mira, who had been measuring when to ignore and when to answer, chose to ignore one more time and felt the choice scrape. She took the alley behind the bakers to lose the eyes. The alley gave her 2 cats arguing territory and a stack of crates that wobbled in a way that demanded a hand. She steadied them, because steadiness answers to any name. Nyx breathed with her. He will keep coming whether he admits it or not. I know. You won't have to chase him. I wouldn't. No. Evening laid a warmer gold across the palace corridors, the kind that pretends a room is kinder than it is. Luka dismissed the last petitioner and shut the outer office doors himself, so hands that had never closed a door wouldn't get in the way of someone who needed the practice. He walked into his chambers and for a moment let his spine relax without witnesses. The ache, which had behaved like a wary beast all day, lifted its head at once, as if offended, to find him alone. Ragnar stood up in the corner of his mind, gigantic and sure. You cannot keep standing between yourself and your own breath. Enough. No. Luka crossed to the window and pushed it open a hand's width. The river sent the city's breath into the room with iron, wood smoke, and mint threaded through it. Mint. He closed his eyes, furious with memory for having sent. He waited for the anger to empty the room, and it didn't. He pressed his fingertips to his sternum. The pressure was not an enemy. It was a reminder. He hated that he knew the difference. He looked down at his hand on his own chest like it belonged to someone who had not been trained to survive by refusing the easy thing. He spoke into a room that had learned how to keep secrets from men who didn't deserve them, and men who did. The words came out low, unguarded, as if they had taken a side door to escape the guard at his throat. Why does she make me breathe? The archive room kept the night even when the sun stood high. Dust drifted in disciplined lines, too slow to notice unless you were old enough to watch time move with its own patience. Elder Marcellus laid the oilcloth bundle on the table and opened it, the way a hunter opens a trap he respects. Fragile papers breathed. Wax seals cracked like thin ice. A pressed leaf lifted the faint memory of crushed mint and smoke. He followed ink with a fingertip without touching. The binder's hand was the same across the years. Tight, slanted, practical. Notes that belonged to midwives who had seen more winters than wars. A child whose scent did not announce itself as it should. Ritual performed under a new moon. A thread tied at the wrist and at the throat in lines that spoke to the old ways. Hide the light. Keep the lungs steady. A village near the river. A house that kept its shutters closed on nights the ridges burned. He leaned back and closed his eyes a moment, counting the arguments he had already lost, and the one he intended to win. The paper did not prove a name. It proved a pattern. He could fit that pattern to a girl who had learned to carry stillness like armor, and who had made air lean toward her without raising a hand. It would be enough for a mind that wanted truth. He knew too many minds that wanted different things. He set the leaves and the thin black thread in a small wooden case, closed the lid, and slipped it into his coat. In the corridor, bootsteps tried to rush knowledge into motion, and failed. He walked without hurry. He would find Luka before the council learned another way to misname a thing. In the city, noon threw hard white onto stone. Mira paused beneath the shallow shade of a sycamore whose bark peeled in maps. The lane smelled of bread and iron, damp wool and a summer apple someone had dropped and stepped on. A man at a stall swore that the rain had ruined his cabbages and that he'd kept them dry all night, but his eyes slid right when he said it. You can hear it, Nix murmured, not pleased or unpleased, simply teaching. The breath lies first, then the mouth follows. I don't want to know every lie. Know which ones matter. She let the sound of the lane open. A woman laughed 2 houses over. The laugh caught, not with sorrow, with a scrape of fear she had learned to sand down in polite company. Farther, a heartbeat stumbled and recovered, a rhythm that belonged to an old injury or a new debt. Across the street, the boy who had called her names in jest yesterday now kicked a stone and watched her from the corner of his eye, with the raw curiosity of a creature who wants to understand what it is afraid of. Mira lifted the basket and moved on. Her feet found the ground with an ease that made even the uneven feel honest. The small ache in her left shoulder, made from years of reaching shelves a hand too high, did not appear. The jar she lifted next felt like it wanted to be in her hand. Nothing about it was loud. It was not a show. It was a body finally in conversation with itself. The binding is cracking, Nick said quietly. You are what they fear. I'm not ready to be a war. You can be a weather change first. And at the corner, a palace runner waited as if he had grown there. He wore duty like new boots that still pinched. He looked relieved when she looked at him, as if meeting her gaze returned him to the proper temperature. By order of the crown, he recited, and then softened it without losing form. Your presence is requested. For what? Investigation of the hedge incident. Now. Her foster mother pressed her a cloak at the door. No questions, only the steadying press of a palm to a shoulder for half a second longer than custom allowed. Mira nodded. The runner set a pace that wanted to look brisk and avoid looking like a parade. People turned to watch anyway. A woman in a second-story window crossed herself, then looked embarrassed at being caught in the motion, and tried to turn it into brushing hair away from her face. A guard at the palace gate straightened without knowing why. muscles aligning at the same moment her steps reached the threshold. The interrogation chamber had been designed by someone who understood how rooms whisper to spines. A single high window. A table with a glass of water that never did what it was meant to do. A chair too rigid for comfort. The usher held the door and retreated so quickly he left a curl of cold air behind him. Mira didn't sit. She set her palms on the back of the chair and felt the wood-recognized touch. The room listened. The walls that had learned too many lies this year waited to see whether this would be another. Luka entered without escort and shut the door with a simple motion that slides into power, the way a blade slips into a sheath that knows it. The black of his coat made the torchlight look lazy. The ache below his sternum had shifted its ground twice since he rose. The tonic slowed nothing now. He stopped across the table and let silence work first. You were seen near the boundary. Yes. You confronted 4 men. 3 and a coward. What did you use? My hands. Not your wolf. My wolf knows better than to waste teeth on meat that wanted to run anyway. You endangered the village. Well, I did not. You will answer the questions as they are asked. I am. Ragnar rumbled, delighted at the clean edges of her replies. She will not be steered like a mule. Luka kept his hands flat. The room knew exactly how close they were. He knew exactly how close his control had gotten to breaking last night when the aura hit him like tide and left him breathing like a living man for the first time in months. He would not let that knowing show. He would make her say the word bond. He would punish himself for needing to hear it. Why did you leave your home? Because I am not a door to be closed and latched. You will be if I decide it. You can lock wood and men, not the air. Do you think you can defy my order and still be welcome in this city? I think you want me to be a problem you can solve with a decree. What are you? A person you refused and still call back. The word stroked a place pride had kept in shadow. The ache lifted, curious, like a beast noticing music for the first time. He pressed it down by force of habit. The habit had saved him. The habit had started to kill him. He didn't know how to stop using something that had worked. You will keep to the city center after dark, he said, because orders are a kind of prayer. No. You will? No. He took one step around the table. The floor noted his weight with interest. Mira's pulse did not jump. He could hear it due to the damnable advantage of the night before. It stayed steady, and that steadiness was not weakness. It was insult. You enjoy challenging me. I enjoy being alive in a place that told me to crawl. You think I want that? What you want keeps changing. Ragnar pushed up against his ribs, warm and impatient. Stop pretending you prefer air that doesn't move. Enough, Luka snapped inside, then out loud to her. You will answer one question directly. Ask one worth answering. What woke in the hedge? What you refused? He almost laughed at the clean mirror. He didn't. He allowed himself a breath wide enough to hurt. The latch clicked. Marcellus entered without sending the usher ahead to ask permission, which meant he had something that mattered more than theater. He carried the small wooden case and the gravity of a man who has seen a thing become too late and intends to stop it. You'll want to hear this, huh? We're in the middle of... It's the same conversation, I've simply brought proof. Luka's eyes flicked to the case the way a soldier's glance gives away what he considers dangerous before he can stop it. Marcellus opened the lid and set it on the table with the reverence you offer a relic and the impatience you reserve for fools. The thread inside lay like a drop of night, caught in glass. The leaves whispered their veins in silver. Midwives' records, he said. A binding ritual performed on a child, scent wrapped at the wrist and the throat, not to hide weakness, to hide power from men who hunt anything they can name. Where? Across the river, dates match. The binder's hand is a person I learned to rely on when I still thought ink could save us. This proves nothing about her. It proves enough about you. Mira stood very still, as if every part of her agreed to listen. The thread pulled a line from her skin memory, a cool circle on a forearm, a knot at her throat that had once pulsed with her pulse and then forgotten it had ever been there. She didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. The old binders didn't use this unless they feared an alpha child would be traded like coin, Marcellus went on. Which means someone had reason to think she was exactly what she is. Convenient, Luka said. Truth is very convenient for the living. He wanted to knock the case from the table purely because it made something inside him unclench, and he was not ready to live without the clench. The ache under his sternum shifted like something waking in snow. The relief that threatened him tasted like surrender, and that made him furious. Ragnar nosed the edge of the case in his mind. You already knew. Your bones knew. Your wolf knew. Only your pride needed paper. Mira looked from the thread to Luka and saw how his hands had learned to hold tables as if they kept him from falling. She hated him for refusing her, and hated herself for noticing the way his breath eased half a degree when she stood closer without moving. He turned his face toward her like a man who insists on looking at the cliff he intends to jump from so no one can say he was pushed. I will not be chained. No one asked you to be chainable. I refuse a bond made for me by a story. The bond isn't a story, it's a fact. You can decide what to do with it. Then I decide to deny it. You can deny rain by standing in it and saying dry. You think yourself clever. I think myself tired. Marcellus lifted the case and tucked it back under his arm. I won't waste the truth by letting it be spoken into a wall that refuses sound, he said to the room, not to Luka, not to Mira, to the part of power that listens even when men choose not to. Decide quickly. The southern ridge grows teeth when we look away. He left, and the door closed gently as if the room had asked for quiet. The silence afterward was not empty. It made a weight in the corners like breath does in winter. Mira and Luka stood with a table between them that had held maps and meals and 3 generations of the same argument. Ragnar prowled in the space that belonged to wolves, striped gold and shadow. Nyx pressed a palm along Mira's spine and did not push, only reminded. You can leave, Nyx offered. I'm not the one who runs. Then stand. Luka took another step. The shortest kind, the kind that moves everything. The air tightened in the way that makes torches steady. He stopped half an arm's length away, and the smallest motion would have touched. He didn't give himself that motion. His fingers opened once and closed, a man discovering how much of his life had been ordered around not reaching. You feel it, he said, low and flat. Yes. When? Since the hall. Since before that, and I didn't know the word. Say it. Bond. The word landed without echo. It didn't need to. It had always been there. Do you want it? I don't want to die for your pride. That's not an answer. I want to live. Do you want me? She breathed in, and the answer came with the air, whether she liked it or not, whether he deserved it or not. She refused to make a humble thing of it. Yes. The room seemed to lean closer to hear whether she had said it to be saved or to end an argument. She had not. She simply refused to lie to her own bones. The relief that punched through Luka was so pure it felt like grief. Rage followed, because pride cannot die quietly. He closed a hand around her wrist before he knew it would help nothing. Look at me. I am. Swear it. I don't swear to men who used my name like a lesson. He tightened, not to bruise, to anchor himself to something that wasn't a table, or a throne, or a story. The pulse under his fingers told him the truth he wanted, and the terms he didn't. You feel it, he said again, as if saying it might let him control it. Yes, you will never beg. Never. He exhaled like a man about to let go of a rope he has held too long over a cliff he never wanted to climb. The grip remained. The room narrowed to the shape of 2 people and the pain that kept trying to separate them and the wolves that refused to learn that trick. Nyx lifted her chin inside Mira, regal without a crown. Ragnar pressed his fur to Luka's bones until they remembered warmth. Out in the corridor, the steward paused with a hand raised to knock and decided he could forget why he had come. The palace held its breath again. But this time the silence was not fear. It was the sound of something breaking that had been wrong to begin with. The city woke eager to argue with itself. By breakfast, Mira's name wore two faces, true alpha in one mouth, cursed bride in another. Children tested both in sing-song, then ran when parents snapped for quiet but kept listening. In doorways, women traded news between loaves. Men at the pump repeated stories as if the water required them. Up at the palace, the council chamber steamed with wet cloaks. Quills scratched. Eyes weighed one another. Luka took his chair and made stillness look like verdict. The ache beneath his sternum had changed since last night. Less a blade, more a closing fist whenever he tried to breathe too small. Seraphine stood without invitation, cream turning the light soft around her. She set letters on the table like counters in a game she planned to win. The city is unsettled. The market whispers. Varos is seen and unseen. This is simple. Exile the girl. We call it diplomacy. The problem leaves our streets. Marcellus stayed near the window, hands behind his back, gaze quiet as old stone. We do not legalize slander with a seal. The realm needs calm. The realm needs lungs. Seraphine's eyes softened toward Luka. Majesty. You felt that pressure in the chamber. She is dangerous. To whom? Marcellus asked. To balance. To those who profit from imbalance. He didn't raise his voice. The white-browed counselor cleared his throat. Signal embers near the southern ridge. A watcher swears Varos lit and doused twice. Quiet riders, Luka said. No banners. Watch, don't chase. Seraphine's mouth made concern a mask. Exile her and the outlands lose a toy. Your strength becomes the story again. Ragnar leaned, amused. She would leash you too if it bought her a crown. Luka kept his breathing even. We will not turn gossip into law. When the room emptied, Seraphine lingered. Mercy is not leadership. Marcellus's answer came before Luka's. Neither is fear. Luka walked the corridor alone. Ragnar matched pace, big and sure. You will not exile your breath. Good. I will not be ruled by it. You already are, you just pretend the crown weighs more. Mira waited until the market's first heat of talk cooled, then stepped into it anyway. Rumor pinched the street around her and slid off like water around a rock. On a stoop, a woman crossed herself, then turned the motion into brushing hair. A man muttered a charm and named it a tune. The first stone clicked on cobbles, thrown by a child to test sound. The second came from an older hand and skittered to stop near her boot. Mira placed her foot where it had been and walked on. At the square, talk thinned into a hush. A voice reached for jeer and broke. Another voice, practical and hungry, told it to hush because a loaf cannot be priced over a riot. Mira bought onions, bread, mint. She set each coin down with a steadiness people noticed even if they wished not to. Nyx pressed calm along her ribs. Let them spend their sharp words on air. You are not air. I want one sentence to end this. One sentence does not feed a hunger. 3 boys tipped pebbles into a palm. An older man didn't stop them. Mira turned toward the fountain's open space where sound carries and cowards prefer packs. The first pebble kissed stone. The second grazed her sleeve. The third never left the boy's hand. Enough. Luka stepped out from the arcade with 3 guards who knew how to be invisible until needed. He didn't raise his tone. Authority fell out of him like gravity. Mira almost laughed. She didn't. She faced him across the circle and offered no relief. He hadn't come to save her. Obsession and duty had chosen the same street. Let them finish. No. I am not your subject in this. You are my subject in all things within my city. The boys fled. A woman spat and missed. Luka's gaze found hers without moving. She looked away. You want calm, Mira said. You won't get it by pointing at me and calling me the storm. You carry weather into rooms. Rooms were stale. Ragnar stirred, pleased. She is not afraid of your floors. He crossed to her because not crossing would be a lie written into his bones. The guards held the distance that looks accidental. The market resumed the motions that allow staring to pass for work. Luka stopped within arm's reach. The space recognized them the way air recognizes a thunderhead and begins counting. Walk. I am. With me. She turned with him because standing would feed the wrong mouths. A side street cut toward the small gate. River breath threaded through brick and midday. Shade pooled along the old wall. You could have stopped them without me, he said, and I did. You were about to make the square listen. Not kneel, listen. And if they refused, they'd learn the cost of being loud enough to make a mistake. They paused where the wall curved and a crack let the river slip its cool through. The city's hum thinned. He set his palm against stone beside her head, not touching, making the space smaller in a move that knew itself too well. You think I am weak? I think you are dying on purpose. Ragnar shuddered at the clean strike. Again. You make me look a fool. You make yourself a monument. What do I gain by binding? Breath. A kingdom that doesn't have to bury its king. What do you gain? Not dying of someone else's pride. You equate duty with pride. I've watched you do it. He stepped closer. Sound folded back on itself. Her pulse stayed steady in his hearing. His did not. He didn't touch her, then touched anyway. 2 fingers ghosted the line of her wrist where his grip had left a memory. Heat threaded heat. The ache loosened. The world widened. Relief hit so sharp it felt like grief for time wasted. Say it again. No. Say it. No. He rested his forehead against hers for a heartbeat he would deny. Breath slid through breath and came back steadier. Ragnar shouted in his bones. Claim. The relief broke. The curse regrouped with cruelty. His knees unlocked. Pride tried to catch him and missed. Luka. He straightened into pain out of habit. Go home. No. This is an order. No. The ground tilted. He grabbed for stone and found her instead. Skin to skin gave the fall a pause, and the curse, insulted, slammed harder. He slid. She moved with him. Fury and fear folded tight into a calm that would not let a life break in her arms. Breathe. He tried. His chest fought him like iron in a vice. Ragnar. We are here. The wolf pressed his massive weight where pain wanted to make a nest. Let her in. I won't. You will die, Nyx answered. Mira set her palm flat at his sternum. Air changed, like a window long jammed finally eased. The vice loosened a notch. He dragged a breath that tasted of iron, river, mint, and something he'd never admit he needed. Guards stumbled into the lane a beat late. Back, Mira said without looking. They obeyed. Orders are easy when they sound like what the world intends. The second wave rose, smaller, meaner. He sagged against her. You are not dying in this alley because you're stubborn. You won't command me. I'm already holding you up. Ragnar lay down in that interior place with his head across Luka's ribs. Let go before you break. Help me, Luka forced, not to a person, to the air, to whatever listened. Say which kind, pride or life. He didn't answer. His hand tightened on her arm and stopped pretending not to need. Pride stepped back just enough to let breath through. It wasn't surrender. It was triage. The ache retreated a hand's width, then another. The world cooled a degree. The river resumed its talk. He heard her heart, steady and furious. He heard Ragnar make a sound like relief, and refused to call it that. At the alley's mouth, a woman with apples set her basket down gently and backed away as if not to wake a sleeping beast. The lane learned quiet. This doesn't change my order. It changes that you can still make one. He pulled away in stages, stood with one hand on the wall, then without it, wiped his brow, glanced at the smear like proof. Do not come to the market alone. I go where I like. Then take someone you like to watch you dislike it. Is that an offer? No. Almost a smile, then not. The guard's pretended interest in architecture. He gestured. Two shifted to block the view. You want me gone. I want my city quiet. You want your chest quiet? He gave the accuracy no reward. Seraphine will push exile. She can ride first. You will be careful. I will be alive. He watched her and decided three truths at once. He despised defiance that fit her this well. He would pay anything to keep breathing. He would still rather break than kneel. He hated himself for how quickly he found all three, and kept them anyway. Leave the square now. She let the order land and tire, then turned and went. He watched because he couldn't not. Ragnar stood with him like a man at a window measuring weather that would take the roof if he waited too long. By sundown, stones stayed in hands. Word had traveled that the king had been there, and his presence makes hands remember they are hands, not weapons. In corridors, rumor found chairs that didn't belong to it. Seraphine counted votes with a smile. Marcellus counted breaths and waited for truth to be allowed through a door again. Night folded along the river. Lamps along the quay flickered as if threatening rain, and delivering none. Mira leaned on the railing and listened to water pull the city's day through its ribs. Nyx stood with her in the quiet place under skin. You will not have to chase him, and I won't. You will not outrun him either. I'm not running. They felt him before they saw him, the way a bond makes air admit another weight. Luka stopped beside her, not touching, close enough that touching had become the next natural idea. You shouldn't be alone. I am not alone. He spared the river the eye roll. Seraphine raises exile in the morning. Let her. Don't shrug at a knife. Let me see it coming. He faced her. Darkness made him look almost gentle, until pride sharpened the lines again. You are going to get yourself killed. I am going to live where I live. His fingers found the inside of her wrist again, as if his hand had decided it belonged there. The world made room. Breath came easier. Gratitude and rage hit together. Say it. No, say it. I make you alive. The river carried the words and didn't drown them. They came back smaller, truer. He closed his eyes and took one clean breath, the kind he had almost forgotten. The curse, offended by ease, changed tactics. His body folded as if a string had been yanked. She caught him, muscle and fury and something tender she refused to name, drawing a circle of steadiness around them that made the nearest guard stop dead. Breathe. He fought. Breath came only when her palm spread over his sternum. Relief was blinding, shameful, exquisite. He made a sound like an animal finding water and hated it and needed it. Do you want to live? Yes. Then stop choosing to die. The wave passed. He stayed in her hold a beat too long for pride. Then stood. He didn't let go right away, which was either progress or helplessness. She refused to label it. You will not use this against me. I'm using it for you. You will not tell them. I don't speak to them. He nodded, a man who had lost a battle he'd lied about wanting to fight. He turned. Pride tangled his steps. He paused to keep from stumbling. You will let me walk you home, he said. You are barely standing. I am still the king. Then command your legs. He did. They crossed the quay with two guards pretending there were three shadows. At her door, he studied the small hinge like it had answers. You will not beg. Never. You will not crawl. No. You will not let me die. I won't. Why? Because I won't carry a world that buries you just to avoid seeing me. He closed his eyes, opened them on a room that had stopped pretending not to care. The ache sat back as if fed. Ragnar lay down and refused to rise. Nyx watched with no pity and no victory, only attention. He stepped away from her door and became the king with that precise shift he had mastered for rooms that needed a shape to hold until morning. He went without looking back, because looking back would finish him. Mira went inside. Her foster mother stood in the narrow hall twisting a towel thin. One shake of the head, and some fear shrank to a size that could make it to breakfast. Nix breathed with her steady. He cannot live without you. I know. You will not beg. Never. She sat on the bed's edge, palm on her sternum, feeling the echo of him like a coin the river had left in her chest. She hated him. She wanted him. She wanted him alive more than she wanted to punish him. Night did what nights do, held a secret and made no promise to keep it. Across the river, Luka leaned on the map table and bowed his head. The room stopped pretending it was only wood and walls. He didn't pray. He breathed and, when breath held, whispered into the dark, to his wolf, to the woman who refused to crawl and still held him up. I won't beg, but I won't let you die either. Morning arrived with a restless pulse, as if the city tried to breathe faster without drawing attention to itself. Mira woke before the bell with heat under her sternum, and the faintest thread of scent at the edge of the room that should not have been there. Rain on stone, iron, mint. She lay still for a count, then sat up and pressed her palm to her chest as if she could shut a door that had begun to open on its own. You do not have to pretend you are not listening, Nix murmured, steady under her skin. I won't let a scent teach me how to live. Listening is not surrender. She dressed, bound her hair, and moved into the narrow hall. Her foster mother stood with a loaf wrapped in a towel that never quite dried. The look they traded was the kind families use when storms are close, not warning, not denial, simply readiness. I'll fetch water. Take the small bucket. It won't feel small. It will if the boys are in the mood to tell stories. The lane had learned how to shape itself around Mira without looking like it was making space. Children ran to the pump, and then stopped short to pretend that was always the plan. Two girls trailed after her, whispering loud enough to be heard. Touch it. You touch it. What if it bites? It's air. She makes it heavy. Mira worked the pump until the metal squeaked and the trough filled. She lifted a brimming bucket with the same calm she had used her whole life, and set it on the stone shelf without flourish. The first boy stepped closer, staring like he expected the ground to change texture. She handed him his water. He went. The bolder boy pressed a knuckle into the air near her shoulder, startled at the nothing, laughed too hard, ran 3 steps, and glanced back as if the road would confess something if he stared it down. A woman at a window clicked her tongue twice. Cursed bride drifted along the lane like peelings tossed to stray dogs. Mira carried the bucket home. Nix moved with her like tied under sand. Keep standing. Let them be bored of their fear. They'll make me a lesson until they need a different story. Then wear this one lightly. By the time the market warmed, talk moved like smoke, visible in certain angles, choking in others. Mira bought onions, mint, a coil of twine. People didn't lower their voices as much as yesterday. Familiarity breeds carelessness. A thin woman recited to her companion that the king had slept in a church the night the candles failed. A man swore a goat had knelt at the altar like a sign from a god no one liked to name. Mira paid the herb seller, the weight of coins ordinary in her palm, and did not speed up or slow down. Under the smell of bread and wool lived that quieter thread, iron and mint, the coat he wore when he pretended not to feel. She did not turn her head. Knowing is not turning toward, Nix said. No, I won't turn. Good. Breathe. Across the river, wet cloak steamed against dark wood, and the council chamber learned once again how to host fear while pretending it was business. Luka took his chair with the practiced stillness that made rooms organize themselves around him. The ache beneath his sternum had changed. Less blade now, more a closing hand that punished him each time he tried to breathe too small. He ignored it the way he ignored winter, by outlasting it on purpose. Petitions. The white-browed counselor began, shuffling papers that did not need shuffling. Curfew, if we are using the words they use. No curfew, Luka said. More watch, less theater. The Bakers' Guild awaits reassurance. Reassure them. Lady Seraphine rose without being asked, cream silk turning light into attention. Her smile arranged itself like a veil that cut while looking soft. The city is unsettled. The South Quarter mutters. The Ridge listens. Varos tastes the air. This is simple. Remove the problem. Marcellus stood near the window without speaking, hands behind his back, gaze on the light as if truth liked to hide in drafts. Exile the girl, Seraphine continued, sweet and reasonable. Not punishment, protection. A friendly house across the border. A stipend generous enough to quiet gossip. The king's strength returns to the story where it belongs. Toy. Marcellus repeated when she called Mira a toy once too casually, his voice even and edged. Seraphine's eyes softened toward Luka. Majesty, you felt that pressure in the chamber. You feel it even now. Ragnar uncoiled in Luka's mind, enormous and impatient. You weaken us more by pretending hunger is a rumor. Luka's jaw did not move. We will not exile a citizen because the market remembers how to talk. Talk turns into knives. Then let us deal with knives instead of tongues. Her lips made concern look like obedience. Pharos loves moments like this. Then stop feeding him. The white-browed counselor seized a chance to speak of anything else. Signal embers on the ridge last night. A watcher swears 2 lights, then none. Quiet riders, Luka said. No banners. Watch, don't chase. When the meeting ended, Seraphine paused in the doorway long enough to deposit a ribbon of perfume that wanted to outlast decisions. Mercy is not leadership. Neither is fear. Marcellus answered for him without turning. The chamber emptied. Silence showed its seams. Luka didn't get up. He waited for the ache to choose a smaller knife. It refused. Marcellus came back from the window and faced him the way you face a cliff you have measured too many times. You will make yourself sicker than the curse if you keep pretending denial is medicine. You believe a thread and a dried leaf will cure me. I believe your body has already told you truth and you are punishing it for knowing. Leave it. Every time you deny her, the curse deepens. It was born deep. It learns new paths when you help it. Enough. Not for long, Marcellus said, grief instead of anger in his voice, and left him with the maps. Luka pressed his fist under his ribs until breathing agreed to obey. Ragnar lay down on the ache with his head on it like a guard who chooses the most dangerous threshold. You want her. Admit it. You need her. Claim her. Be silent. I won't. Then sit still. I am still loud. By late afternoon, the sky practiced for winter, gray and thoughtful. Mira crossed the apothecary lane with a bundle of leaves for her foster mother and chose the narrow path that curved behind the palace's old river stairs. Dogs knew this path. Kitchen boys cutting corners knew it. Noble women did not, which was why it was good for hearing what markets never hear. Sound slid here like secrets that couldn't help themselves. Voices came ahead, careful and trimmed. Mira slowed, laid her hand on rough stone, and let footfalls soften into the building's own shifts. The riders will say the tracks were old, a man said, voice measured, professional. They always say the tracks were old, a woman answered, silk drawling over steel. We need only one night, a quarter hour. If no one looks too closely at where the watch was standing when the lantern went out. They won't, the council will be busy being worried about other things. And if she does not leave the walls. She likes the dark roads. She wants to be alone. And sure, alone means the road between the hawthorn and the broken fence post you never remember to fix. South Barrow Path, the man summarized, and of course. If someone were to benefit from a raid that looked random, who would argue? Varos never argues with smoke, the woman said. He admires himself in it. He will think it was his idea. And the guard captain. Has a brother who owes money to men who like dice. Debts are as useful as love, when properly cultivated. You cultivate well. I do. Mira knew the voice without the perfume's help. Seraphine grew her sentences like vines that looked decorative until they strangled the bricks. "She is not a threat if she is not in our city," the man observed. "She is not a threat if she is not breathing," Seraphine corrected gently. "But we must be compassionate." "You want an accident." "I prefer chance. Chance is polite. It lets people keep their stories." "Where should the lantern fail?" "At the second turning. And the patrol." 4, not 6. Say the roster got crossed. A man with a scar near his mouth will swear he saw teeth in the hedgerow. He always swears he saw teeth. That is why we pay him. Mira pressed herself flatter into the ivy's shadow as silk brushed stone so near her cheek she could feel the thread count. Seraphine's perfume fought the ivy, and won by a breath. "You could simply," the man began, and his hand cut the air in a gesture Mira could hear. "Please," Seraphine breathed. "I am not a butcher, I am a shepherd." "If a lamb breaks a leg, a shepherd?" "When it is a lamb." "You think she is a wolf. I think she is a story that forgot which mouth it belongs to." Steps moved toward the arch's mouth. Mira counted 1, 2, 3. The man's boots declared confidence. Seraphine glided like oil over water. "And if the king comes?" the man asked, lowering his voice. "He will be attending to business in the North Hall with a council whose petitions have suddenly multiplied. He has been unpredictable. Men are unpredictable until the night they are not." "You sound certain." "I know the sound of a leash even when it is made of pride. It snaps the same." They passed. Silence returned with that practical speed places keep for work. Ivy settled back against stone. Mira let air back into the bottom of her lungs and eased out from the wall. "You heard enough," Nick said, steady as a hand closing around a truth. "They will give the dark your name and call it mercy. We can stop it. Tell the one who can stop it fastest, and he will hide behind law to avoid being human. He will still move. Pride can pull a rope. It does not always know which direction, but it can pull." Mira slipped along the path like a cat that owns a fence. At the corner, a page nearly collided with her, eyes full of errands. She let him go. The sky thickened. Lamps along the river began to practice light. At home, her foster parents had laid out bread, cheese, and a knife worn smooth by other worries. Mira sat and looked at the food until it blurred. "What?" "Seraphine plans a chance raid tonight." "Where?" "The South Barrow Path." "Then we bar the door," her foster father said, logical in the way men are when logic is all they can hold. "She won't come to the door," Mira answered. "She prefers to move paths under feet." "What will you do?" her foster mother asked, not to forbid, to be included in the courage. "Not walk where she thinks I will." "You cannot avoid every path. I can make them regret thinking they built the only one." Night arrived early, wearing river breath and the small sounds of dogs reporting on the alleys. Mira stood at the window long enough to learn where wind pressed against corners. Mint and iron threaded the smoke, patient as a promise. "You could throw the tray," Nick suggested, entirely serious. "I would have to pick it up." "Then don't throw the tray, go. Soon. Now." She drew on her cloak and stepped into the dark. The city at night wore a truer face. Footsteps could be catalogued by intent within 3 strides. The side gate's guard straightened when she approached, and then remembered to narrow his eyes, the way men do when training argues with instinct. Business. A message. For whom? For anyone who knows the price of mistakes. He hesitated the length of a smaller man's temper, then nodded because he was not that man. She passed under the arch. Stone shed heat with small ticks. She kept to the corridor behind the steward's office toward the little door that led to Marcellus's chamber. She didn't reach it. Voices came from the far end. The soft swing of a door. The hush of someone who controls the shape of rooms by standing in them. Mira stepped into shadow and listened for the particular weight of footsteps that had taught her bones to pay attention. The door opened. The corridor drew one deeper breath. Then the perfume fought the ivy again, and the night sharpened to a point. Seraphine's laugh, silk thin, slid into the dark. Make sure the lantern fails at the second turning. It will. And send me the name of the brother who likes dice, Seraphine added, sweet as poison. One should always know the shape of one's debts. They moved away. The corridor emptied. Mira pressed her fingertips against cold stone to keep from moving too fast for the work ahead. The city beyond the wall inhaled. The South Barrow path waited with hawthorn, a broken fence post, a lantern wick ready to choke, and men who loved smoke more than truth. Dusk pulled a cool veil over the fields, and Mira slipped beyond the last brick road to where the city loosened its grip. The small forest along the river kept its own counsel. Thin paths threaded between birch and hawthorn. Nettles leaned into light. Birds traded places with bats. She stepped off the track and let leaf mold take her weight. Breath steadied. Her pulse eased into the rhythm of things that did not care about council chambers. You came to stop running from yourself, Nyx breathed low and sure. I came to think. Then think with your body. You are not a mouth, you are a pulse. She closed her eyes. The world clarified at once. Ants negotiated a twig near her boot. A web shivered between two reeds. Farther in, a doe exhaled, slow and damp. The river hauled its dark length around a bend and did not hurry. She let her attention widen until it nearly touched the opposite bank, and then pulled it back to the space her lungs occupied. Show me, she whispered, not to the forest, to the part of her that had waited years without sulking. You are alpha, you are not prey, let pressure become shape. She pictured the feeling in the palace chamber, a tide rising inside her skin, polite, inexorable. She found the edge of that tide now, and pressed it forward a finger's width. Leaves hushed. The closest birch leaned the smallest degree. A blackbird flitted to a higher branch and held, listening. She drew the pressure back until its weight fit her bones again. No drama, no spectacle, only control. Again. She eased the tide outward. Grass flattened and recovered. The river answered with one extra lick at the bank as if tasting a new current. She breathed, held, released. It obeyed. Good, she said aloud, surprised at the ease in her throat. Better, Nyx approved. This time set a circle. Hold it. Walk inside it like a room you built. She imagined a ring as wide as her outstretched arms and let her aura settle along its edge. The ring steadied, then hummed. She stepped forward, and it came with her. A moth bounced at the line and skimmed over it as if it had discovered a warm window. Mira smiled, then stopped, then let herself smile again. The feeling wasn't triumph, it was relief, like nails finally pulled from a door that never belonged there. Something else moved at the tree line, too quiet for a fox, too certain for a deer. She felt it before she heard it. A shift in the air where pride and violence travel together even when they pretend not to. She did not turn her head. I know you're there. Leaves whispered. A dark shape unstitched from the birch shadows and resolved into black coat, pale hands, gold eyes that caught what little light the sky had not pocketed. Luka paused where the path met the clearing's edge, as if measuring how much ground his body tried to claim without permission. He wore control like a second spine. She watched the exact moment he smelled her, relief shivering across his face like a ripple he crushed at once. Ragnar rose in him, huge, frantic with hunger kept too long on a chain. Closer. No, Luka muttered, and the word could have been for himself, for the wolf, for the forest. He stepped forward anyway. Mira held the circle without thinking. The line brightened, invisible to sight, undeniable to bodies. Luka stopped within it. His breath changed the way a man's breath changes when pain eases for a heartbeat and that grace makes him furious. You followed me? You left the wall? This is not your wall. Everything within a day's ride is my wall. Then your wall includes trees. He scanned the clearing like a commander checking a map for traps. The ring pressed against his shins and let him in anyway. His mouth flattened. He hated being allowed like that. What do you call what you did in the chamber? Breathing. You made the room kneel. I asked the air to pay attention. Don't play at words. I'm tired of playing at anything. He moved closer until the edge of her circle pressed his coat again. The sight of it did something strange to the ache in his chest, as if a hand that had been closing decided to listen. He refused to be grateful. Gratitude felt like a leash. You are a girl with tricks. I am a woman with a spine. You are a problem I intend to solve. You are a coward. His head tipped slow. Careful. Of what? Words. You like laws because they keep you from answering questions with your mouth. You enjoy goading me. I enjoy naming what tries to hide. Ragnar prowled along the inside of Luka's ribs, delighted and enraged. She stands. Do you see it? She stands where we meet? She stands because I allow her, Luka answered inwardly, and saw the lie from above, like a river marking a flood line along a wall. Nyx pressed her warmth up Mira's spine. Do not chase. Hold. Luka stepped into the ring. The air recognized him, altered shape and didn't flinch. The ache receded an inch against his will. Anger followed, automatic as heartbeat. He wanted to put his hands on her shoulders and shake and pull and hold all at once. He put them behind his back instead, the way a man does in a church to keep from breaking something he doesn't own. You think this is love, he said low, or fate, or some story you can forgive me with later. I think this is blood recognizing breath, the rest is your fear. You mistake fear for discipline. You mistake discipline for a life. He took one more step and the urge to close the distance surged through both of them like heat. She did not retreat. He reached, halted, reached again, and set 2 fingers against the inside of her wrist because his hand had learned the route. The world found room for the touch, as if the clearing had expected it and had rehearsed how not to panic. Say it, he breathed, and no. Say it. I make you alive. The sentence hit him as hard as truth always does. Rage and relief met like storm fronts. The pressure in his chest loosened with insulted grace. He leaned toward her without meaning to. She lifted her face the faintest degree. The bond pitched the moment forward heavy and simple. Nyx held Mira steady. If you want, take. If you do not, teach him what refusal looks like. She stopped the kiss before it began without moving at all. She let dignity become a wall he could see and would have to climb with something other than his mouth. Luka jerked back as if he had found a blade he hadn't planned on. Shame ran ice along his bones. Habit tried to call it pride. Coward, she said, soft enough to cut deeper. He answered with silence because the only words available would have undone him. Ragnar snarled at the retreat. You choke us both. He turned away too hard, threw his hand through a low branch and came up breathing sharp. The branch swung, leaves trembling. Mira kept the ring steady, heart steady, voice steady. You will keep doing this until it kills you. I will not kneel. You already are. In secret, to pain. He laughed, a raw edge. You are very brave when trees outnumber men. I was brave when your court outnumbered me. The forest shifted, not with their argument, with news. A thrush struck 3 quick notes in a row from the far side of the hill. A pattern the palace riders taught birds the winter the snows thawed too fast and the river forgot how to keep to its banks. Luka stiffened. The ache locked his ribs for 1 second. Purpose broke the lock. 2 scouts slipped from shadow to shadow and stopped at the edge of the clearing, chests heaving, eyes bright with the speed of bad tidings. Ridge sign, the first said in one breath. Rogues, closer than last week. Near the east hedgerows, the second added. Someone doused the boundary lanterns and trimmed the wicks. Not a storm. A hand. Mira tasted iron. The small muscles along her forearms tightened without her permission. The ring around her brightened in her mind and then settled, because she said it. Whose hand? Luka asked. Not ours. Rumor's already ahead of us, the first warned. Says she pulled them here. All three looked at Mira. The air between them did not move. Rumor is bored, Mira said. The second swallowed. Bored mouths are loud. Luka's fury reoriented like a compass corrected by striking iron. He looked at Mira and did not bother to hide calculation or the way obsession knotted itself through it. His orders came without lift or drama, a machine long practiced starting with one clean stroke. Seal the east hedgerows, riders in twos, no banners, no torches unless the wind holds. If you see sign, you do not chase. You shadow. Breath low. Feet light. Send a raven if there's a breach. The scouts nodded and vanished the way good news never does. Mira watched his hands open and close. She watched the way he kept his body from reaching for hers when it wanted to. He turned back to her with a look that tried to be a wall and failed at the corners. You will stay inside the city. No. This is not a debate. It never is with you. You... He stopped. Different words found him. You will not make my work harder. I am not the ones trimming lanterns. You are why they think it will work. That is not mine to fix. It becomes yours when they use your name to kill you. I will not live small to make their lies tidy. Ragnar pressed against his ribs so hard his heart stuttered, and then caught. Take her. Put her where breath cannot be stolen. Lock and guard and keep. Nyx's reply brushed Mira's thoughts like fur along a leg. We were not bred for cages. You will not walk the South Barrow Path, Luka said. I don't walk where Seraphine wants me to. Then tell me where you walk and I will put a wall around it. You cannot wall a forest. Watch me. You will die building fences while wolves step through the gate you forgot to close. He took 2 strides and captured her shoulders in his hands. The heat that leapt across his palms shocked him with its rightness. The ring of her aura flared and did not throw him. It held him exactly where he stood and turned his grip into a vow he hadn't meant to make with his fingers. If they come for you, he said, voice rough, breath rougher, they die by my hands before yours. Why do you get the first kill? Because I can live with the stain. I can live with it too. Not on you. The clearing tightened around the shape of them. Birds forgot to move. The river paused as if learning new grammar. Say it is not about possession, she whispered. It is not. Say the part you will not. His jaw clenched. Pride fought language and lost. He didn't give her a sentence. He gave her weight. His hands remained, steady, not hurting, not pleading, claiming nothing, refusing to release. The curse moved in him, testing boundaries like a beast in a pen, then went still, confused by the sudden lack of fight. We move now, he said at last, voice back to iron because iron is easier to hold. Toward the hedgerows. If any rogue breathes near your village, I will know before he finishes the thought. And if the thought is about me, then it ends. She lifted her chin. The ring sank into her skin and became muscle and decision. She did not shrug away from his hands. She did not lean into them. She kept exactly the distance he held. Walk, she said. He let go. He didn't want to. He did. He gestured toward the narrow track. She stepped first because he let her, and because she chose to, and because both could be true. They moved through low light and the small attentions of a forest that had learned 2 predators and decided it could watch them without choosing sides. They reached the path that fed the east hedgerows as the first stars tested themselves against the coming dark. Shadows collected under hawthorn, thickening around fence rails. A lantern at the lane mouth flickered, then steadied after a practiced fumble. Trimmed, Luka said, by a hand that thinks it is clever. It may be. It isn't the first clever hand I've met. They paused together, listening. Far off, a branch snapped where a man's weight mistook patience for safety. Nearer, a fox scolded the dark and lost interest. The scouts signaled once. 3 quick whistles swallowed by leaves and melted. "You will go back," Luka said. "No. You will. You can order your soldiers, you can't order me to be less alive. You mistake disobedience for courage. You mistake control for care." He looked at her as if he had finally found a language that would obey him only if he spoke to it gently. He didn't try. He moved closer instead, not to touch, to make a wall with his body that faced the dark. "If they come," he said again, quieter, "they meet me first. Their blood is not the only stain." "I know." "Do you?" He didn't answer. He scanned the hedgerows and counted lives he would end without regret, and lives he would keep, even if it cost him nights like this forever. He felt Ragnar settle into the old harness and lean forward, joyous in purpose. He felt the curse sit down at the fence line and listen for once instead of gnawing. Mira watched his profile in the dim and hated him and wanted him alive more than she wanted to win. She turned her face toward the hedgerow and let her aura step forward. As a warning line, the body understands when words fail. The nettles bowed. The hawthorn murmured. Somewhere unseen, a breath caught that did not belong to either of them. "Stand with me," she said, "and I already am." They waited. The night gathered its hems. The first wrong footfall would be earlier than dawn, and later than wisdom. The clearing behind them remembered the shape of hands on shoulders and pretended it had always known how to hold mercy without turning it into surrender. Wind slid along the hedgerows and refused to carry answers. Mira held her ring of pressure just ahead of the hawthorn, a soft boundary the body understands even when the mind refuses. Luka stood to her left, weight balanced like a blade. 3 short whistles stitched through leaves and died. The scouts melted and reappeared farther off. One palm flat to ground, the other shaping signs the training yard burned into muscle. 2. East. Slow. Ragnar leaned hard inside Luka's ribs, joy and rage braided. "Let me bite." "Not yet." "You hold your teeth until your throat closes, clever, deadly." Mira's breath stayed even. The air inside the circle felt obedient, not tamed, willing. She adjusted it a finger's width. Nettles bowed. The lantern at the lane mouth tried to gut her and recovered. A runner crashed out of the lower track and stopped at the sight of them, chest heaving, hair pasted to his forehead, eyes too wide for someone so young to be out alone at this hour. "Emergency council." Luka didn't turn. "Then tell the council to wait." They insisted. "Lady Seraphine says the South is aflame with rumor. She demands you name the girl a danger and have her escorted to the border before dawn." Mira felt the smallest ripple where her ring met her skin and stilled it without looking. Luka's mouth did not change. The wind shifted. Mint threaded the hedgerow and wrapped the order he didn't have time to deliver. He gave the runner a look that turned panic into purpose. "Find Marcellus, tell him to keep the table from eating itself. He speaks in my voice until I return." "Should I say why you are not in the chamber?" "Tell them I chose the part of the city that bleeds." The runner fled, gratitude loud on his boot soles. Silence stitched itself back into the lane. Mira could almost hear Seraphine's voice from here, sweet as glass, slanting words so they cut without looking like knives. "Go," she said. "No. They will use your absence against you. They will use my presence against you. They already are. I know." Ragnar thumped his tail once in the dark of Luka's skull. He chooses the hunt over the room. Progress. The hedgerow breathed. Footfalls. Wrong weight trying to learn patience. Failing. A man hissed an order he meant to whisper. Another laughed the kind of laugh men make when they think the story is already written. The lantern, beyond the second turning, dipped, recovered, dipped again, as if a hand practiced failure. Mira felt Nyx's attention turn like a face. "They will test your circle. Let them. Then teach. I won't break unless I must. Break only what tries to break you." Shapes detached from the thorn and took form. 4 at first, then 6, then a 7th, who moved with the casual confidence of someone who wanted to be counted last. They wore dark cloth without fuss and the wrong smell under their coats. The leader's mouth held amusement as if his teeth fit too comfortably around it. "Look at that," he said, and the rejected bride took a walk. Mira kept her hands quiet by force. "Turn around." That sounded like a prayer. "Then answer it." He stepped forward and didn't cross the line. Bodies know when air is not theirs. He masked the flinch by shifting his weight as if to spit. His eyes slid to Luka and tried to dig for fear. They found steel instead and drew back splintered. "We heard the king got himself a weakness." Luka didn't respond. The sixth man, lanky and eager, edged along the hedge, testing the circle with the careless flirtation of a hand hovering over a candle flame. It burned without heat. He blinked hard and pretended dust bothered him. "You will step away from this road," Luka said, voice low, not loud enough for the road to echo. The last man, the one who enjoyed counting himself after the rest, smiled. "We came to fetch a package. From what I hear, it travels light." "Turn around," Mira repeated, "and we brought friends." They did, but not the kind that get counted. 2 more in the ditch, 1 on the bank, 1 who had climbed the fence and crouched at the top rail like a clever crow. The lantern made a show of failing again, then steadied, despite its own choice. "Your lantern game is sloppy," Mira said. "Fix the wick if you want the story to work." That rattled the leader. He flicked 2 fingers, and the man on the fence dropped into the lane, crooked smile advertising the scars he believed made him interesting. "She doesn't scare easy." "Try harder," the leader said. Ragnar's growl crawled down Luka's spine like thunder rolling a hill. "Enough." "Last chance," Luka said. The leader's face made a shape that might have been a shrug. He moved as if to step back, then slashed forward without warning. Lanky and eager lunged in the same breath, hoping speed could learn what respect already knew. The circle tightened without Mira changing her stance. Pressure sank along the ground like fog with rules. The first man's knees told him to kneel, and he disguised it as a stumble. The second's knife arm lost will at the elbow. "Now," Nick said. "Not triumph. Timing." Mira stepped once. The ring surged with her. She set a palm to Lanky's wrist and turned his momentum into the dirt without breaking a bone. He hit hard, surprised at the ground's refusal to accept him gently. She did not keep the hand. She let him feel the decision of gravity that did not belong to him. The leader barked and threw himself into the gap he thought he saw. Luka was there before the thought completed. He didn't draw the long blade, because he didn't need to frighten anyone. He caught the man's shoulder with open fingers and changed the man's direction, the way a river changes a branch. The leader's breath left in a sound he had not planned to make. He got a knee under him and found Luka's foot, where his chest wanted to be. "Another try," Luka offered. The 7th man arrived from the ditch with the kind of knife that draws pictures on other men's backs. Mira felt him before she saw him, that particular intent buzzing against the ring. She turned and met him with a forearm-to-forearm block that ran up the bones like clean sound. He cursed without words and snatched back his knife to make a higher guess. She didn't allow it. She stepped in, shoulder under his center, hip a pivot, and put him on the ground with a relief she hadn't known her body wanted. "You have no idea what she is," the leader hissed, eyes bright with the fever of men who prefer stories where women are prizes or ghosts. "She is the line you cannot cross," Luka said. Blades flashed. Cloth tore. Someone yelled for Veros out of habit. The fence crow swung a chain he pretended was a weapon. Luka caught it, let it wrap his wrist, and used the link as a leash to jerk the man off balance. Ragnar laughed in his bones, delighted. "Yes." Mira's circle expanded with a heartbeat's mercy to give space for motion, and then narrowed again to keep the field clean. Eager scrambled up with mud on his palms and fear in his mouth. She let him run. The ditch man rose, knife reversed. Smarter now, aiming for tendons, not pride. She rewarded the thought with a wrist flick that sent the blade into Hawthorne and a knee that discouraged schooling for the rest of the week. The lantern failed at last. Darkness clapped like a rude guest. For a span that lasted longer than anyone admitted, sound did the seeing. Boots scuffed, breath hitched, steel bit wood. A hawthorn twig broke small. Mira felt the ring in her bones rather than in air now, a bandwidth down lower, near the pulse that lives under the collarbone. She held it. Luka moved inside it like someone who had finally learned the floor plan. A flare bit open near the lane mouth as scouts lit a stick and shoved it in a bucket to gild the dark without blinding the night. Faces leaped out of shadow and were replaced by new ones. The seventh man rolled, gained a crouch, and spat toward Mira's boots because he'd learned too late to fear her and wanted to pretend the delay was choice. "Rejected bride," he said, reaching for a myth strong enough to stand in for skill. "And still too good for you," Mira answered. He leaped. She didn't. She changed places with him. He found the dirt. She took the knife from his hand with the kind of pressure that doesn't bruise, only insists. More boots. Two real rogues this time, the kind who move without bragging, slipping from hedge like patient shadows called by coin and opportunity. The ring pressed their ribs without consent. They swore small. The leader saw his chance dwindling and made a fool's bargain with speed. "Now," he shouted, and the fence crow threw a handful of sand at the ember bucket. For one blind beat, the world went without even pretend light. In that beat, the leader cut toward Mira, low and sure. Ragnar slammed into Luka's thoughts hard enough to make breath hitch. "Mine." Luka didn't think. He moved. He reached into the dark like a man who can see his own death's hands and caught a wrist he had no right to find. The blade scarcely kissed the edge of Mira's cloak before his grip closed. His other hand crushed the man's throat just enough to teach his body the difference between bravado and air. "Drop it." The knife hit dirt. Mira's ring surged and locked. The hedge itself seemed to lean, Hawthorne pressing Thorn inward like a witness choosing a side. The patient rogues backed, eyes narrow, bodies giving ground without calling it retreat. "Pharaohs won't like this," the leader rasped when Luka loosened his hold enough to allow him the sentence. "Tell Varos he's late to his own idea," Luka replied. "You think she won't bleed?" "She bleeds when she chooses." The man spat near Luka's boot and missed on purpose. He lifted his hands, palms out, and stepped until Hawthorne nipped his sleeve like a dog, reminding him about consequence. He grinned with all the charm of rot. "You'll choke on her." "Unlikely. You already are." From the bank, someone whistled the signal thieves use when the job goes bad and pride wants a plausible exit. The ranks thinned with sudden discipline. One by one, they slid back into hedge and ditch and shadow, becoming the kind of silence that stays on your clothes. The seventh man, slower and angrier, lingered. He wanted a parting shot that would crawl under skin. He took it. "Varos knows," he called, voice pitched to Carrie. "The bride is the key." He fled, nimble now that cowardice had finally taught him agility. The words hung like ash. Mira dropped her ring. The night rushed in, raw and full of sound. Her knees remembered they had worked. Her breath remembered it had been earned. She found Luka in the dim without looking the way your tongue finds a tooth, even when you try to avoid it. "Are you hurt?" "No. Let me see." He took her forearm and turned it to lamp the skin in the weak light. His fingers were rough and careful and possessive, in a way that made something inside her want to bare its throat and bite his hand in the same moment. He catalogued a scrape, a shallow cut, nothing else. Relief struck him naked. He masked it by scowling at the scrape as if it had personally offended the crown. "Hold still." "I am. Still." "You are." He didn't release her. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist where the pulse answers questions before words do. Breath came easier for him. He hated it, and leaned into it, and hated that too. Ragnar sprawled warm behind his ribs, pleased and panting. "Ours." Nyx breathed with Mira, steady as a drumbeat. Not a prize, not a cage, a vow eventually. Or a war. Scouts returned, faces lit by ember glow. Tracks out. No blood trail. They'll circle and lose themselves along the north ditches. Send a shadow, Luka said, not a chase. Aye. And tell the hedgerow keeper if a lantern fails again, he can spend the night learning how to trim wicks while holding thorns in his mouth. The scout nearly smiled and vanished. Seraphine's name moved through the hedges like a rumor already forming itself into a speech. The guard captain would call it a breach. The council would call for a march. Merchants would call for cheaper bread in exchange for fear. The city would ask whether a girl's presence had made the night too interesting, and whether exiling her would make mornings behave again. Luka didn't look at the road to the palace. He looked at the woman in front of him, and at the place on her wrist that had taught him relief. He stepped closer, the air folded in, heedless, obedient. He lifted a hand and then closed it because touching her face would undo something he had not finished breaking. Veros knows, Mira repeated quietly. He thinks I'm a key. He thinks if he holds you, he holds me. He does. I know. She stared at him. Anger, relief, wanting, scorn, and something bitterly like tenderness argued in the narrow space between them. She didn't say the word mate. He didn't either. They both heard it anyway. Say it isn't about possession, she said. It isn't. Say the part you keep swallowing. He was very good at silence. He had trained the palace to admire it. He had won wars with it. Tonight, silence refused to stay trained. The words scratched his throat until they became air. You are mine, he said, voice rough, eyes burning, whether I want it or not. She flinched like a flame hit by a breath too hard, then steadied. Nyx lifted her head and did not bow. If he claims, he lives. If he refuses, he dies. Truth does not change because mouths dislike it. Ragnar pushed, hungry and certain. Claim. Luka closed his eyes for a heartbeat because pride tried one last time to throw itself between them and choked on its own weight. When he looked again, the road, the hedge, the scouts, the city all narrowed to the size of the pulse under his thumb. Come back to the palace, he said, and the request carried orders the way iron carries heat. No, you think I will beg. I know you won't. And still you refuse. I will not be smuggled as a problem to be hidden. If I walk in your hall, I do it with my head up. If I sleep under your roof, it will not be because Seraphine told you to bring the stray indoors to stop the neighbors from talking. He looked like a man taught to navigate by stars that had chosen a clouded night to abandon him. He found ground anyway. You will not walk home alone. I am not alone. I will not argue grammar. Then walk. He gestured, and two shadows became guards again. The hedges sighed, relieved at being left to birds and wind. They crossed the lane. He took up the space at her right shoulder that belongs to wolves who have decided not to leave, even if it kills them. The scouts fanned and folded and vanished as if the night had swum up and swallowed them. At the city edge, the lamps learned their work again. People leaned from windows in the way you do when fear makes you curious and curiosity makes you pretend to adjust shutters. Rumor ran ahead. It would arrive before dawn wearing new names and new wounds. They stopped at Mira's door. The street was quiet the way wood is quiet. It holds noise and saves it for a worse day. Luka looked at the small hinge like it might grant a request if he stared long enough. You are not safe here, he said. I am less safe where I'm a trophy. You are not a trophy. Then don't hold me like one. His hand had drifted back to her wrist. He unclasped it, regretted the loss, did it anyway. He backed one step, found the line where king ends and man begins. Landed on both. We end this, he said. Veros, Seraphine, the leash made of pride, we end it. By morning. By breath. She almost smiled. Lightning flickered low on the horizon as if the weather had its own opinion. Nyx stood in her bones and approved. Ragnar took that approval like meat. Luka turned because if he stayed he would say a word he refused to give the night. He nodded to the guards and moved, the ache in his chest quieter than it had been all year. insulted and soothed and learning to lose. Mira watched him go until the dark claimed him, then put her hand where his had been and felt the river leave a coin under her skin. Inside, her foster mother waited with the towel she wrung when nights got long. Mira shook her head once. Fear shrank to a size that could crawl to morning without dying. She lay down without undressing and stared at the ceiling until the ceiling blinked first. Across the river, Luka stood over the map table and pressed both palms flat on wood that had learned his weight and his wars. He did not pray. He did not beg. He breathed and let the breath stay. Ragnar lay with his chin on his paws, satisfied and restless. We do not get to pretend anymore. No. Then we live. He looked toward the window and into the dark where a girl had turned a road into a line men could not cross and decided to keep standing in it. He would not let her die. He had already chosen that. The other choice waited like a door with his hand on the latch. Behind him, the corridor learned the new shape of his step and forgot how to be impressed by silence. The city slept, or pretended to. The rogue's warning crawled into corners and dreamed its own teeth. Morning would come and ask them both what they had named themselves during the night.